Hello everyone and welcome to the semifinals of the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge. It's the first game of the match, Magnus Carlsen vs Hikaru Nakamura, and like all the other matches, they will play not one but three matches to decide who goes into the finals of the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge. And it's already pretty wild from game one, so let's just dive straight into it. But before we do that, here are their head-to-head scores so far. So as you can see, in classical games, Magnus Carlsen has quite a positive record against Hikaru, beating him 14-1 with 25 draws. But in rapid and exhibition games, it's 44-19 with 39 draws. So again, in favor of Magnus. This does not include online games. I believe these are only over-the-board games, but I think it wouldn't make much of a difference if, regarding ratio, if we included online games. So that being said, let's check out the game. Magnus opens with e4. We have e5 by Hikaru, knight f3, knight to c6. Hikaru is always very comfortable going for his Berlin with the black pieces against e4. But Magnus now goes d4. He goes for the Scotch, which of course is very rarely seen on the highest level, but he did play it somewhat after his training with Garry Kasparov. So e captures on d4, we have knight captures and bishop to c5. Now with a double attack on the knight, we have knight captures on c6, and now before recapturing, first queen to f6. Now saying, I'm going to recapture later, but also I'm just threatening checkmate on f2. So you have to deal with that. Magnus plays queen f3, defends against checkmate, and now d captures on c6. We have knight to c3, Magnus continues developing, and now bishop to e6. We have bishop to e3 by Magnus, both players obviously ready to castle queenside, and now Hikaru goes for bishop to b4. He puts pressure on the knight here, and Magnus just goes queenside castle. And it's quite the move, because, well, what happens if just bishop captures on c3? If captures, you no longer have the option of trading queens because the bishop will recapture, so you would have to capture back. The problem is, if you go queen captures on c3 now, then white has this bishop to d4 move. And now you have to trade queens as the g7 pawn is hanging, and after captures, now you have to defend the pawn, let's say f6, now rook g1 goes after the pawn, and after g6 something like f4, and white is down a pawn, but he has the bishop pair, and well, just a much easier game. And also, if you played this, you obviously had it over the board at home, so Hikaru knows that Magnus is very well prepared for this. So after queenside castles, there is one game where queen to e7 was played in the database, but Hikaru just trades queens right away, and it is as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. And he spent quite a lot of time for this move. Even it's a 15-minute game since they're playing rapid games, and Hikaru took over 5 minutes for this move, so it does take a toll on his clock. So g captures on f3, and now knight to e7. And Magnus immediately goes for h4. He wants to play h5 and limit the mobility of this knight. The pawn prevents the knight from going any of the central squares, and this pawn will prevent it from going to g6. So here Hikaru decides to grab the knight on c3, mess up Carlsen's pawn structure, but in doing so he gives up the bishop pair. So bishop captures, we have b captures, and now rook to d8, going for a rook trade, and Magnus obliges. We have rook captures with check, king captures, and now h5, so taking away the g6 square from the knight and preparing rook to g1 at some point. And here, of course, if you go after the pawn, then Magnus can just lock your bishop with c4. The problem is now you're in some danger of having your bishop trapped. So you'll have to go for something like b5 and give back the pawn. Let's say captures, captures, and captures, and we get this, again, this position with a bishop pair against a bishop and knight, but with play on both sides of the board, white should be much better here. So instead, after this h5 move by Magnus, also Magnus wants to play f4, f5. Hikaru pushes f5 himself. He would, of course, very much enjoy if Magnus captures here, but Magnus likes this pawn on e4, so he's not going to react to this. And, of course, Magnus doesn't mind captures, because he will just undouble his pawns. So c4 by Magnus, grabbing more space here, and now rook to f8. Hikaru brings the rook into the game, and now rook to g1, putting pressure on the g7 pawn. Hikaru defends it with the rook to f7, and now comes a4. Now Magnus starts grabbing some space on the queen side as well. With a6 by Hikaru, maybe preparing b5 at some point to grab more space, but now a5. And now Nakamura will not be able to push b6 or b5 since Magnus has complete control of the b6 square. Of course, b5 is met with a captures on b6 en passant. So g6 by Hikaru, now challenging the pawn here, asking, do you want to capture so I can capture back? But Magnus says, I'm not in a rush to capture anything. I prefer the position being the way it is, just rook to g5, keeping an eye on everything. Now, if you want, you can mess up your pawn structure. I'm going to capture with the rook and then put pressure on your h7 pawn. So Hikaru goes rook to f6, adds another defender to the g6 pawn this way. And now Magnus decides to trade. We have captures, we have rook captures on g6, offering a trade of rooks, and now even c5 by Magnus. Now the bishop, after the bishop moves, again you have complete control over the b6 square, so you're not allowing any counterplay on the queen side. King to e8, Hikaru brings the king into the game, and bishop to d3 now, with a triple attack here on the f5 pawn. And the situation on the clock is Magnus 6 minutes, Hikaru 3 minutes. So not a lot of time for Hikaru. Here Hikaru trades, we have rook captures, bishop captures, and now h5, putting the pawn to a light square, but also just starting to push his past h-pawn. And now king to d2. Magnus also wants to bring the king as deep into the position as possible. So king f8 by Hikaru, now king to e3, and now king f7. Hikaru could have gone king f7 right away, but what Hikaru is doing here is he's waiting for Magnus to make a move, as Hikaru is happy with a draw here. So if Magnus doesn't do anything active, Hikaru will just repeat moves with the king. So here we have bishop captures on e7, and Magnus took over 3 minutes to decide on this move. You could go bishop to f4, there's no way to defend the c7 pawn. But it's questionable if the c7 pawn is actually worth anything. It's a doubled pawn, but you could capture it, then go maybe rook, bishop d8, and then eliminate the knight, grabbing the pawn in doing so. But Magnus decides there's no need to it. He just captures the knight, and after king captures, pushes e5. He wants to push f4 next and put all of his pawns on dark squares, so Hikaru's light square bishop will be unable to challenge them. So h4 by Hikaru, starting to push his passed pawn, also putting it on a dark square, and now f4. The king will now be able to reach the pawn if needed, and it will be very hard to defend this h-pawn now. So Hikaru goes king to d7. Now Hikaru has a different plan. He wants to bring the king over to the queen side, push b5, sacrifice one of the pawns, and then also create a passed a-pawn. So f3 by Magnus. And now comes b6, not b5, as if b5 then Carlsen probably just ignores it. So here b6, forcing Magnus to make a decision. And now if you go for the a6 pawn, then the two outside pass pawns are in fact extremely dangerous. So here Magnus decides to go for captures on b6. We have c captures on b6, and only now bishop captures on a6, which grabs a pawn, but it kind of does trap his bishop, hence the title. Fischer-esque, as Bobby Fischer in game 1 against Spassky did trap his bishop. So here b5, and now Carlsen's bishop is trapped, and Hikaru will very, very gladly just win it by going all the way with the king. However, it requires 4 moves. So what did Magnus figure out will happen in those 4 moves? He goes king f2. Of course, he wants to eliminate this pawn, shift the king over to f6, attack the bishop, force the bishop to move, and then advance the e-pawn. That's the idea. So who's faster here? Hikaru goes king c7, we have king to g2, we have king b8, king to h3 by Magnus, king to a7 going after the bishop, and now king captures on h4. King captures on a6, Hikaru is now up a bishop, but king to g5, we have king to b7, and now comes king to f6. Now Hikaru's bishop has to move. Hikaru moves it to d5, also puts pressure on the f3 pawn, but now Magnus doesn't push the pawn or capture on f5, rather he takes a moment to improve the position. He plays c3, so there's no rush. Point is that he wants to put this pawn on a dark square, not allow black to push b4, and then cement white's pawn on c2, and this way you're also just preventing b4. So king to c7, Hikaru starts bringing the king into the game, and only now king captures on f5. So now we have 2 connected pass pawns here. king d7, and now king to f6. Hikaru grabs one of the pawns. We have bishop captures on f3, but now e6 with check. We have king to e8 and now king to e5, making room for the other pawn to start marching forward. We have bishop to g4 by Hikaru, but now f5. We have bishop to h3. Hikaru just has to wait and see what Magnus will do. We have f6 by Magnus. Bishop back to g4, and now king to d6, going after this pawn as well. Bishop back to h3. Not much you can do here other than wait. And now e7, which is very strong, putting pawns on dark squares. And at some point, if the bishop ever leaves the diagonal, you will be able to, let's say, play f7, get the king away, and then just promote the e pawn, or you can just gobble up these pawns. So for example, if the bishop guards the pawn here, then you just win by f7 check. You force the king away from the bishop, and next move you just queen the pawn. So instead, Nakamura just waits, king to f7, but now king captures on c6 by Magnus, and it was also in this position on move 47 that Hikaru Nakamura resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So by nothing more to be done here, I mean after Hikaru makes a move, you can never capture this pawn because this pawn just queens, so you will have to make some moves with the bishop, but then king c7, you'll go king to e8, c6 is coming. Once the bishop moves, let's say bishop e4, you're gonna go king to b6, again make room to advance the pawn. So king f7, you're gonna go c7, bishop f5, you're gonna guard the queening square, king b7, and now, doesn't really matter, whatever you play, c8 queen is coming, you're gonna have to give up the bishop, and next move, king here, followed by queening, and that's it. So really impressive game. Magnus traps his own bishop, but he calculates precisely that it is in, he has more time to create two connected pass pawns and to win the game, regardless of being down a full piece. So yeah, that's game one of their match. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Richard Knapp, Mike Wagner, Heiko Lewin, Hussein Alkewat, and Veljko Vlahovic for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And if you have a moment extra to spare, do check out the link in the description below. The first thing you will see, it's really awesome. See you soon. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Chess24 Legends of Chess tournament. We are in the third match, Yanni Pomnici versus Anish Giri, and for some reason in the previous video I mentioned that Anish won the second match, and he was able to retaliate and force match 3. However, I said that he won in the rapid section, when in fact he won in Armageddon. I have no idea why I said that. That's just how it is on this channel. Sometimes I'm gonna say the weirdest stuff, so don't take it personally, I am sorry about that. So getting back to this one, this is the third match. It seems the image is blinking a little bit, changing colors. No idea why that's happening. But yeah, the 4 rapid games ended in a draw. So the first 4 rapid games ended in a draw. The first blitz game ended in a draw, and now this is the second blitz game. And whether this one ends in a draw or not will depend on do we go into Armageddon. So Yanni Pomnici with the white pieces opens with e4. And yeah, sorry about that. So e5 by Giri, and now knight to f3. We have knight to c6 and d4. For the final blitz game, Jan goes for the Scotch. And if you don't know, the blitz games here in the Legends of Chess tournament are 5 minutes per player plus 3 seconds increment. So e captures on d4 and knight captures on d4. We have knight to f6, and now knight captures on c6. We have b captures and e5, going for the Mises variation of the Schmidt, of the Scotch, and now queen to e7, pinning the pawn, so you can't capture. We have queen to e2, now preparing to capture, and knight to d5. And this has been played, well, for a very long time. The top move being c4. We already mentioned this a few videos ago, but nowadays h4. And it's very interesting how, you know, just neural networks are taking... well, so much from the game. I mean, you can't really learn how to brute force your way through a position by imitating Stockfish, but you can learn a thing or two from Leela about opening theory and the positional stuff. So here h4, we have a5. Usually but white will play c4 here, like we mentioned, and then black wants to reply with bishop to a6. But here, as white already wasted a move playing h4, black will now play a5, so when he does play bishop to a6, he will already have a pawn on a5. So c4 by Nepo and bishop to a6 by Gary. We have knight to d2. And here we have knight to b6, and interestingly, knight to b4 has been played once in this position. Alexander Morozevich lost to Dmitry Yakovenko in the 2017 Russian Blitz Championship. So knight b6 here by Giri is a new move in the position, and it is already as of move 10 that we have a completely new game. So Nepo just continues pushing his passed h-pawn, not a passed h-pawn, just an h-pawn, and that's what you do nowadays in every opening. We have queen to e6, Giri makes room to develop the dark square bishop, and now even h6. And now the thing is, if g6, which obviously can be played, you're going to play b3, put the bishop on this diagonal, and the neural networks such as Lila Chess0 showed that this will definitely be a great asset for white later on in the game. So after h6, we have g captures on h6 by Giri. It's not the cleanest pawn, but it is still a pawn up. So you're going to play bishop here, probably bring the rook over to the g file, and for the moment keep your extra pawn. So b3 by Nepo, he just continues development, wants to develop his dark square bishop to this very nice diagonal, and a queenside castle by Giri. Bishop to b2, continuing development, and now bishop to g7, and a queenside castle. We have rook h to e8, now putting a lot of pressure on the e5 pawn, and of course f4. Nepo defends it, and now we're in a position where black has to decide what to do. The bishop and the knight aren't doing all that much. Nepo did a very nice job. This c4 pawn really putting a stop to everything. And probably what you should play something like d5 or maybe d6. But Giri wants to save his central pawn and bust open the position with the f pawn, and he plays f6. And it's always interesting when someone plays f6 whether this is one of those positions where it's actually okay to play f6 or not. So here it's not, and you're welcome to feel free to, not welcome to feel free, but you're either welcome or you are feel free to pause the video and find the move Nepo played while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the knight move, as it's just brilliant. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight to e4. And it's interesting that Giri already spent some 2 minutes from his 5 minutes starting position, whereas Nepo just blitzed out everything. So this is well within his preparation, and he knows what he's doing here. So here, the problem is you're threatening knight to c5, which will attack the queen and then win the bishop on a6. So of course, you cannot defend with the king, as then the king also runs into a fork. So what you could do is play bishop to b7 to kind of prevent that, but then you just get e captures on f6. And now this is a defended passed pawn. It's just a very, very tough position for black to play. You don't really have a good move. You can move the bishop, but that's just it. If you go for trades here, it doesn't work out well for you. You're going to capture on g7, and then after, let's say, captures on f4, you're going to capture here, capture that, play rook h8, and it's game over. So this is what Nepo is hoping for. Giri finds a different idea. Giri says, okay, you capture my bishop. I'm just going to play f captures on e5. And okay, Nepo goes for it. Knight to c5 with an attack on the bishop and the queen. And Giri spots queen to f5. He wants to meet the knight captures on a6 with e captures on f4, opening up an attack on the queen and on the bishop here. And the king could be somewhat loose here on c1. So Nepo goes for it, knight captures on a6, and e captures on f4, opening up an attack here. So you have to move the queen, and here Nepo goes for queen to d3. It's hard to imagine from a position like this, but queen to d2 is actually the way to victory. The point is, you want to be able to play c5 and defend your knight on a6. That's how you need to play it. The point is that after this captures and captures, and let's say the king attacks the knight, you always have this c5 move, and it's now perfectly fine as the knight is defended, and your knight is also under attack. You will have to move it. Then comes queen captures on a5, and so on. And it seems like queen to d3 does pretty much everything the same. It even offers a queen trade. The problem is it is a little bit different, because here Giri first plays bishop captures on b2 with check, king captures, and now queen to e5 with check. Now, point being that the king is in check, and you have to figure out what you're going to do. For example, if queen blocks, then you can just captures, and then bring the rook to e5, and the rook from e5 will guard the c5 square, so the knight cannot escape. On the other hand, You could also block with queen to c3, which is what Nepo did, but now Giri gets his idea into the game. King to b7, now threatening to win the knight here. And here the problem is, if you go c5 now, then it doesn't really work, because black has queen captures, king captures, and now knight d5 comes with check. The king is no longer on b2 like in the line we've shown. And after king b2, now you get knight to e3, and you will have to give up the rook here, because if you move the rook, let's say you will have to give up the rook even here. After check, king moves, you have to give it up now. Because if you don't, if you try something else, you have to give it, you have to capture it instead of moving the king. If you do this, let's say knight e3, then you're gonna, well, either move the rook, you lose the bishop, and then after the bishop is lost, king captures on a6 is coming. So the thing is, after king to b7, we have queen captures on e5 by Nepo, and now rook captures on e5, guarding that c5 square, and here just rook captures on h6. And now, okay, you cannot capture right away, because then just check will pick up the knight here, but it does allow c5. So this is the little problem that why queen to d2 was better than queen to d3 what Nepo played, but obviously you can't have everything analyzed at home, and you know, in a blitz game, things like these are impossible to find. So here the knight is lost, so you might as well grab a pawn while losing it. So knight captures on c5, we have rook captures, and now rook captures on h7. And all of a sudden, from that really winning position from white, we get this position where white is better, a bit more active, but the material on the board is completely equal. So here, rook to f8, defending the pawn here, and now bishop to e2, not allowing this pawn push, but also preparing bishop to f3, which blockades the black pawn and also puts the bishop to this beautiful diagonal. We have d6 by Giri. c6 is the way to go. Then move the king, and then maybe move the d pawn. However, Giri played d6 here, and it's really an epic moment in this game, because this completely blunders the pawn. Rook captures on d6 is a free pawn. You will not be able to capture back because of the pin. Problem is, Nepo, of course, when playing such an elite player like Giri, does not expect Giri to blunder a pawn like this, and of course he misses the idea, and he just continues with the development of bishop to f3 check. And I mean, this happens very often in chess, and there's even the case of I hope all of you know Josh Waitzkin. I remember when I was enjoying his lectures in the Chess Master series. I think it was Chess Master 11, the Grandmaster's edition. He mentions that he was playing in some sort of a junior state championship, and that he was playing for the first place. And in the final game, he was playing against an opponent who hung a full rook, and Josh just didn't see it. He was so focused on the game, and he didn't expect his opponent. He like attacked the rook, and his opponent didn't move it. He just played something else, and both of them completely missed it. He said his opponent after the game told him that he immediately saw that he blundered the rook, but that he was like having this super cool poker face so that Josh wouldn't realize that something went wrong. So Josh missed it, but in the end was also able to win the game. So that's like a happy story in the end. But yeah, it's not uncommon to blunder a move like that, as this is a blitz game. Stuff like this happens way more, even in classical chess. So bishop to f3 check, sometimes called a case of double blindness. So bishop f3 check, we have king to b8 by Giri, and now rook to e1, preparing rook to e7, which will pose serious problems for black. So knight c8, preventing the rook lift all the way to e7, and now rook to e6. A nice rook lift, which will, you are now just preparing to somehow double up here. So rook to g5, and now king to c3. Nepo brings the king into the game. We have rook f to g8, and now rook to f7, going after the f4 pawn. And it seems like you can't defend it. However, there is a very sneaky way, and Giri plays it rook to e5, saying if you capture here, then I get a defended pawn here, and if you go after it, I'll just defend it like this, and everything is perfectly fine. So after rook e5, we have rook to h6, now preparing to bring the rook over to h7 to put pressure on the c7 pawn. And here it's like Giri fell asleep in game 6 after an entire day of playing. He played a4, and he just completely forgot about Nepo's real threat, which is doubling of the rooks on the 7th rank. So here, rook h to h7 by Nepo, and now there really is not all that much you can do. Giri played a captures on b3, we have rook captures on c7, now threatening rook b7 check, and if the king has to go, you know, under the mask of the bishop, that's just game over. So rook e3 check by Giri, we have king to b2, and now you cannot allow rook b7 check, so here Giri just captured the bishop, gave up the exchange, g captures and b captures on a2, but now we have king captures on a2 and rook to g3. Here Giri is now hoping to create a passed f pawn, but rook b7 check, king a8, and now comes rook b3. Defending the pawn, we have rook g2, king a3, and now rook to c2. Going after the c4 pawn, we have rook to c7 is also playable, just defending it and winning the knight, so not a problem there. Or rather, okay, you don't have to win the knight. For example, rook c7, knight a7, and then you can go rook to b6, but it requires some additional moves. So instead, Nepo just went with rook to b4. He defends the pawn, and he's going to win the knight on the next move by playing rook to h8. So rook c3 check, king a4, or rather not king a4, king to b2, attacking the rook. Rook captures on f3, and now rook to h8, just attacking the knight. The knight, of course, cannot move, and that's just it. Giri played a few more moves, rook f2 check, king c3, and it was in this position on move 45 that Anish Giri resigned the game, and with it the match, as after 4 rapid games that ended in a draw, 1 blitz game that ended in a draw, Nepo wins game 2 of their blitz section and is now the finalist of the Chess 24 Tournament of Legends, and will face Magnus Carlsen in the finals. And yeah, that's it. Tomorrow we continue with this show with the, well, I don't know who I would rather see in the finals. Both Giri and Nepo against Magnus would be excellent. But I don't know. I always kind of feel like Nepo has better chances against Magnus, but it's also hard to say because I think Giri is a more solid player than Nepo, but Magnus doesn't care about solid. Like you have to do something to beat him, and I kind of think Nepo is somewhat better at that. I don't know. You know, in classical chess, I think of course Giri would have much better chances, but here I don't think so. So yeah, it's going to be a pretty wild game, so we'll see what happens. So I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Larry Dingle, James Moore, Patrick Moore, Thomas Moore, and Divya Mohanarangan for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Legends of Chess tournament, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Sunday. Hello everyone and welcome to a really wild game, and as the title suggests, a very short one, between Felix Langal, better known as XQC, and Charlie, who doesn't have an official last name. Rather, I wasn't able to find one online. I did find one, but it does seem to be an unconfirmed one, so I decided to skip it out. But on Twitch he's known as Moist Critical, and on YouTube as Penguin Zero. And yeah, it's a very short game. So without further ado, let's check it out. Too many of you have requested it, so I decided to show it as part of this video, where we are going to discuss several things. So without further ado, XQC opens with e4. We have e5 from Charlie, knight to f3 by Felix, and now knight to c6, and d4. The Scotch is on the board. We have e captures on d4 and knight captures, so nothing out of the ordinary here, and bishop to c5, now with a double attack on the knight. And here you could do a lot of things. For example, knight captures on c6 is a very popular line that attacks the queen, and then you can do a nice in-between move that threatens checkmate, and only after the queen defends can you pick up the knight here, and the game just continues. However, after this bishop to c5 move, Felix played c3, defends the knight on d4, and now comes knight to f6. And this is one move that can often end in a very short game when players who are just starting out their chess journey are playing, and it is what happened in this game. Here you would usually continue with something like bishop to e3, and then the game continues where the queen is a bit suspicious on f6. However, Felix played knight captures on c6 here, and he left his f2 pawn undefended, at which point Charlie just captured it and delivered checkmate. So queen captures on f2 is checkmate, and this is how this game ended in 6 moves. So Very impressive, and Charlie was very impressed with himself. He said that this must be some sort of a record. He was he inquired to what is XQC's chat saying, and so on. So why I'm showing this is, well, aside from a lot of you requesting it, is because I would also like to share with you this article. It's an article from Chess Tech Beyond the Board, and well, it talks about, is PogChamps a good way to promote chess, or basically is it an embarrassment for chess? Now here I'm going to read the entire article now. So for those of you who are not interested in hearing that, I will also put just a link to it in the description below if you prefer reading. But here we have views of David Lada, who is the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at FIDE.com, and also that of Stefan Loeffler, who is the Features Editor of Chess Tech. So one is for PogChamps as ways of promoting chess, and the other one is against it. So let's just briefly go through it. So chess.com runs a chess tournament on Twitch between popular gamers and streamers. For FIDE Chief Marketing and Communications Officer David Lada, PogChamps is the best chess promotion in years. Chess Tech editor Stefan Loeffler sees it as an embarrassment for the contestants, the world's biggest chess platform, and ultimately our game. So let's see some of the pros and cons, or so to say. Here, David Lada says, I am very critical about how chess has generally been promoted. We have been doing it all wrong all the time, with very few exceptions. The inaugural Chess.com PogChamps is one of these exceptions. I hope it is here to stay. Chess is popular, but the overall popularity of the game doesn't pay justice to the fantastic qualities that chess possesses as a product. I firmly believe there is a huge untapped potential. I would go as far as to state that we could double the size of the currently existing chess community in the medium term, just with some hard work in the right direction and with a little bit of creativity. So our main sin is that chess people tend not to think outside of the chessboard. They don't pay enough attention to the world around them. This little flaw is inherent to our nature. The game rewards those who manage to isolate themselves, but this bad trait is reflected in how the chess world is structured and how it functions. Also, he says purely promotional activities are marginalized. You give 10k, probably $10,000 or 10,000 euros, doesn't really matter, to the average chess organizer to improve his tournament, and he will spend it on hiring 2 more 2,600 players. Like, this is going to make a difference. Also, he says that if you give him $1 million, he will organize 10 tournaments in exactly the same way, with $100,000 or euros in prizes each. We live in perpetual endogamy. Repeating ourselves, almost no one is inventing in reaching out to new audiences. There are very few strategic plans in place to expand and bring new players to the game. This is where PogChamps fit. The initiative just ticks all the boxes. You take a bunch of popular variety streamers with a combined audience of 15 million subscribers and you throw a chess challenge at them. I believe some of these guys actually learned to play during the early weeks of the lockdown. Is it silly? Yes. Are we making a show out of the absolute beginners blundering pieces? Yes. So what? Also, he says another common sin is our chess community is that we take ourselves too seriously. PogChamps is not disrespecting chess, but quite the opposite. The whole thing sends a message to a huge audience showing how easy it is to learn the game, but how difficult it is to master it, and it demonstrates that chess can be fun from minute one. I am just eyeballing from the perspective of a former business person, but this initiative probably awakens a curiosity about chess in 2 or 3 million people. 1 million of them may become occasional players, and maybe around 250,000 of them will turn into hardcore fans. New chess consumers who will contribute towards the chess economy by taking chess lessons, participating in open tournaments, and buying chess books. Also, I remember when my friend Antonio Radic, that's me, started his YouTube channel. His rating is around 1952,000, and he commentates chess games for an audience up to that level. I recall hearing some demeaning comments from grandmasters at the time, but the skepticism vanished when the number of his subscribers surpassed anything seen before. He has now 671,000 followers and growing. Antonio has probably brought more people more new people to the game than many super GMs together, and we all benefit from his work in direct and indirect ways. We need more PogChamps, and more Agadmators. We need celebrity tournaments, hand and brain events, pro-biz exhibitions. We need more banter blitz and more commentators like Pepe Cuenca. We need corporate championships, singers like Huga, photographers like Leonard Otis, artists like Maria Hugina, and global chess festivals like Judith Polgar's Chess Connects Us. We probably can live without one more 2700 round-robin tournament. The only thing that bugs me about PogChamps is that the idea did not occur to me before. So this is basically David's view of the whole matter regarding the PogChamps. And now we're gonna check out Stefan's view. He says, Bob and Danny, commentators of many world-class events, cannot help laughing. A simple knight check picks up the queen. He's referring to the game Fusli, one of the streamers was playing in the PogChamps Championship. A simple knight check picks up the queen. Will Fusli see it? If it's not pronounced Fusli, apologies for that. I do not know how it's pronounced. Her hand moves towards the knight, but she picks up a pawn next to it. Eyes are rolling. Her opponent doesn't use the chance to save his queen and instead continues with an attack on the knight. Prompted this way, Fusli moves the knight and gives the check. She still hasn't seen that it nets her the queen until she bursts out what a F-word genius she is. Then follows by, Fusli is one of the 16 beginners at chess who happen to be famous enough on Twitch to warrant an invitation on PogChamps. Chess.com spends $50,000 in prize money and probably a similar amount on commentators and transmissions. The viewer numbers may be worth the investment. However, and this is something that, well, that is basically the whole theme of this video. The real price the world's biggest chess platform is paying is its reputation. Something I'm very interested if you guys agree on. Regular users are dismayed that the Patzer Bonanza has taken center stage, as if their favorite platform told them who cares for a match between Carlsen and Aronian when you can see Fusli, right? Also, he says, PogChamps reminds me of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which was not the lowest point but the emblematic format of trash TV. C-list celebrities embarrass themselves for attention, publicity, and a handful of cash. The trouble with chess is that it takes years of play and study until you occasionally produce a game that is worth seeing. Letting beginners play for an audience is something one should never do. If Chess.com wanted to do a show with gamers and streamers, instead of presenting them as fools, they should have been respected as the learners they are at chess. They could have competed at minigames, solved puzzle rush, exercises of the simpler variety, and showed their team skills at hand and brain. And only in the end of the show they would play a normal chess game one against one, not on the practical but boring user interface of the chess platform, but in a cool, gamified display as gamers and their fan audiences are used to. So that's it for the article. You've heard David's view of the matter and also Stefan's view of the matter. So I'm very much interested in to which view are you leaning towards. I know most of you guys are silent watchers on the channel, but maybe for this video you can make an exception. And if you don't really feel like typing anything all that much, you can just write who you're leaning towards more. And yeah, that's basically the question is. Are we satisfied with chess the way it is without bringing more people to the game, or do we want more people to the game? Because on one side you have me, some random dude here from Croatia, analyzing elite grandmaster games, and on the other hand you have super grandmasters analyzing games played by maybe 16 to 1800 ELO players. And I don't know. It's a tricky question because, for example, if someone only knows the moves of the game, he doesn't know much more, and he sees a game played between, let's say, since Stefan already mentioned Carlsen and Aronian, if he sees a game played between Carlsen and Aronian, analyzed by, let's say, 3 super grandmasters, basically all he's gonna hear is blah 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 blah. And I don't think he's going to be all that much interested in becoming a chess player or taking up chess or investing any time in learning chess at all. And on the other hand, when he sees Fusli blundering, let's say, 3 pieces in one move and that be presented as a positive experience, you know, everyone is laughing, everyone is enjoying themselves, that person might decide to take up chess, invest more time in it, and well, maybe even become a chess player with time. So you know, both I would say for getting more people to the game, like David suggests, that we were to maybe double the existing chess base of players, PogChamps, I believe, is definitely the way to go. And it's yeah, it's a very interesting article and a very interesting question. I, for one, side with the David on this one, since it's something I've been doing for forever, and well, I'm just always up for bringing more people to the game. I don't think it disrespects the game or that it's an embarrassment for chess. People who like, I haven't been following, even though a lot of people follow PogChamps, I didn't really show any games from PogChamps aside from that one that Voyboy played against Nate Hill, as I was showing games from the Clutch Chess International and from other bigger events. So of course, when there's like a game between Carlsen and Aronian, as that we've already used that expression, I will of course show that one first, but it doesn't mean I'm not interested in this and will not show this. And yeah, I just think, since I'm not an elite player, me showing a game between Carlsen and Aronian is more enjoyable for beginners and someone who maybe is trying to take up chess than when a super grandmaster does it, as their commentary is you know, far more well, detailed and sophisticated than mine. But yeah, basically that's what I wanted to ask you guys. Who do you lean towards, David or Stefan? You know, do comment, and yeah, that's it. That's basically it for this video. I do hope you enjoyed this 6-move game, this Charlie Brilliance, and that you've enjoyed my reading skills, which are not all that impressive, but you know, it did take me a while. And yeah, also I would like to thank Aber Majumdar, Jel Hermans, Suleiman Surti, Stephen Bevan, and Russell Light for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of anything what happens in the chess world, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and so on. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone, and welcome to a really wild game that a lot of you have recommended to me already. I've decided to check it out, and it really is quite the game. It's been played in the Vergani Cup between German Women's International Master Anne-Marie Mitsch and Dutch International Master Max Warmerdam. And it's just the kind of game we need to properly start 2021 with. So without further ado, let's check it out, as Anne opens with e4. We have e5 by Max, knight to f3, knight to c6, sorry about that, and d4 now. So striking in the center, just a normal Scotch here. We have e captures and knight captures on, knight captures on d5. And here bishop to c5, attacking the knight twice. And here knight to b3, attacking the bishop on c5. If you remember, we covered this position many times, but it's also the position from one of the most famous games ever played between XQC and Moist Critical, also known as Charlie White, where the game continued c3. Queen to f6, and now knight captures on c6 and queen captures on f2, checkmate. I don't know if you've seen that game, but it was you know, a lot of fuss about that game, you know, with the one with all the throbbing. So bishop to c5 and knight back to b3, attacking the bishop on c5, bishop back to b6, and knight to c3. So this has all been played before, and this is all very standard theory. Knight f6, developing the knight, preparing the castle, and the queen to e2 now. Also defending the pawn twice, preparing to develop the dark square bishop, also castling queenside will be an option. Castles kingside, and here bishop to e3 as planned, challenging the dark square bishop on b6. And here Max just lunges forward with d5, and it makes sense. The white king is still in the center of the board, so why not? Here we have queenside castles, now not allowing the pawn to capture anything since the queen is still on d8. And here we have d4, attacking both knight and bishop. And again, this has all been played before, nothing new happening here. The most common move in this position is bishop to g5. Also, this was played, there is a very famous game, Anand versus Lore Fressinet, in the Alekhins Memorial in 2013 in St. Petersburg. where Anand won a very nice game, but here, not bishop to g5, but rather king to b1. And king to b1 is a new move in the position, so already as of move 10, we have a completely new game. And again, of course, both pieces are off limits. The queen is still on d8. And here, Max just starts going after the white king. So a4, he wants to push that pawn all the way. And now knight to b5, and this is now very tricky because if a4, just knight captures, so nothing to worry about there. The pawn is attacked 4 times, so there's no way to defend it. And here something really awesome happens. Here Max plays d, captures on e3. He captures that pawn and now offers a full queen. So let's just hit print screen here. We might even use this as a thumbnail. And if you don't capture the queen, there's really not much to play. You're down a piece, so you have to capture the queen. And captures the queen, and now rook captures on d8, and now the simple f3. So a queen for a piece and the rook. And how do you evaluate this? Well, white should definitely be better, but it's always unpleasant, especially with the passed pawn already on e3, and the queen has to block it, so it's not very pleasant. But let's see how the game continues. Bishop to e6, Max continues development, and now knight to c1. We have knight to d7, shifting the knight over to the center of the board, and now queen to e1, making room for the bishop. We have knight d to e5, centralizing the knight, and now bishop to e2. And here now, as the c4 square is guarded by the knight, just bishop to c4, knight to c4. Now, an excellent square for the knight, and it offers white to capture that knight. And it is, in fact, good to capture the knight, as this light square bishop is really doing nothing. So here, and captures, we have captures by bishop, and now knight to c3. Now this knight is coming to d1, and from d1, this knight will be attacking the e3 pawn, and it's not all that clear how black will defend the e3 pawn. And once the e3 pawn falls, it's basically just a winning position for white. So here, rook to d2. An excellent rook lift, and well, once you double up here, it's going to be a very unpleasant position for white. So here, the immediate knight to d1, it is the only good move for white in the position. You have to eliminate that e3 pawn, and there's there simply is no better plan for white than this. But here, Max finds a very interesting idea on how to continue the game with tension. Rook captures on d1. He eliminates one of the attackers of the e3 pawn, and now the e3 pawn will survive, even though at the price of an exchange. So queen captures on d1, and now rook to d8, pushing back the queen, and now knight to d3, blocking. And here, h6, so just making some breathing room for the king, so you don't have to worry about those back rank mating ideas. And here, queen to c1, unpinning, and also maybe putting pressure on the bishop, on the e3 pawn. Maybe even white can give up the exchange just to get rid of that, and then try to play this position, queen and knight versus bishop, knight, and rook. But here we have knight to b4, and this is a very ambitious try by Max. Here you can even play the very forcing rook captures on d3. Point being that after c captures and the bishop captures with check, king to a1, now knight to d4 ensures black a draw. So you could just play it out like this. For example, queen c3, knight to c2 check, king has to go back. You're gonna go knight to b4 check, king has to go back. You can't go to c1 because knight captures on a2 check, wins the queen. So you have to go back, and then we just get a nice repetition. So you could actually force a draw here. But Max obviously wants more. He goes knight to b4. Now there's a triple attack on the knight on d3. And now knight captures on b4. We have a captures on b4 and rook to d1. Here, Anne says that she's very much comfortable playing a queen against the bishop pair. Never a good idea, as there is nothing more fierce in chess than a bishop pair that is fully operational. So rook captures on d1, queen captures, and now even e2, attacking the queen. Queen has to go to e1, and now bishop to e3. And now we have this position that is really... the engines give it as better for white, but it's so uncomfortable playing it for white because the pass pawn is protected, and you can never move the queen from e1. Once the queen moves from e1, let's say you play something like queen captures on b4, just bishop f2. You guard the queening square, and that's it. Black wins. There are no tricks. There's nothing here for white. So white really has to figure out how to keep that queen into the game after this bishop to e3 idea. Now there is one move here that seems particularly strong, and that is f4. f4 is just very nice because you cannot capture. Once you capture on f4, you no longer have the option of playing bishop to f2 if the queen moves, and now the queen can capture, and now it's actually a much better position for white. For example, bishop goes back, you have to defend it. There's not much for black to do here now, and you've managed to clear one of the very important pawns here. And also, instead of something like this, you could also play bishop captures on h2, but just queen back to e1. Of course, you're not going to allow bishop to g3, and then you're going to start pushing those pawns, get the king into the game, and so on. So here, instead, after bishop to e3, we have a3 by Anne, and now comes c5, not allowing this pawn to be moved from b4, and of course white can never capture twice on b4. So a captures, c captures, and queen captures is not possible, just bishop to f2 will be guarding the queening square. And here g3. Just improving the position a little bit for white. We have bishop to d4, and now king to a1. So here, again, a very tricky position. It's unclear how white should proceed, and it's not very clear how black should proceed. Definitely you should bring your king into the game and try to get the king somehow involved, but that's a lot of pawns here, and also the queen is still on the board, so you have to be very careful. So here we have b5 by black, and c3 now attacking the bishop. Here we have captures, and now bishop back to e3, king to b2, and now bishop to b3. And now it's again, how do you improve the position? Here we have h4, king to f8. Now Max starts bringing the king into the game. King to b3, king to e7. We have king to b4, and bishop to c4 now. We have king back to a3, and now king to e6. King back to b2, and now bishop back to d3. So black still figuring out how to continue here. We have king to b3, and now g6. And I forgot to mention here, this is actually an over-the-board game, not an online game. King to b4, and bishop back to c4. Some repeating of the position here. King a3, king back to e7, king to b2, and now king to e6. So it seems that both players are content with a draw, but of course, there's still much moves to be made. King to c2, we have king to e5, and king back to b2. We have bishop back to d3, king b3, and now f6. A nice pawn move to prevent any repetition of moves. And here, again, it's a very, very interesting position. White again has this beautiful breakthrough of f4 with check, and this is super tricky because now you either push the king back, and then you've taken all of these squares away from the black king, and you will have it much easier at keeping the draw. And of course, if king captures, then it's just a forced draw because of queen to h1 check. The pawns prevent the king from going to the dark squares. The queen controls this diagonal, so your only option is king to f5, and now queen h3 check. Only move is king back to e4, and now you just repeat check, 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 and it's a forced draw. So this was the option here, this f4, twice already in the position, but here we have king to b4 instead, and now black gets the upper hand because of the much more active king and the bishop to c4 move. Now with bishop to c4 being played, it no longer applies. For example, if f4 king captures, you will have the d3 square available to your king, as now the bishop has moved. So king back to a3, g5 now by black. We have captures, and now comes king to b2. We have bishop back to d3, and now king back to b3. Bishop to c4 check, king to c2, and king to d6 now. We have king to b2, and now bishop back to d3. King to b3, and now king to c6. We have king to a3, now king to b6, and now king back to b3. And now bishop back to c5. We have king to b2, white just has to repeat moves, there's nothing to attempt here, the queen can never move, otherwise we said bishop f2 is just crushing. So king to c6, and now king to b3. White can be now very, very happy with a draw. Bishop back to e3, and now king to a3. We have king to d6, king to b3, king to e5, and now king to b2. And here just g4. offering a pawn here to weaken this pawn in the center. So here white goes f4 check instead, and now again if you capture here on e4, it's not even a draw anymore. Now white actually wins the game because of queen to h1 check. You're gonna lose the bishop on d3. Your only move is king f5, and now queen to d5 check wins the bishop. And not only does it win the bishop, but it also does so with check, so you can just easily pick up the e2 pawn. So you have to be very, very careful here. After this f4 move, this pawn is not free for grabs. So king back to e6 by Max, and now king back to b3, king d6. We have king to b2, king to c6, and now king to b3. So a lot of moving around with the king. King to b6 now, king to a3, and now king to c5. We have king to b3 and king to d6. King to b2, and now king to e6. We have king to b3, and now bishop to c5. We have king back to b2, and now bishop back to b6. King to b3, and now f5 by black. And of course white says, okay, I'm very happy with this, I'm gonna grab more space here. And now white definitely improved the position, as now white has a passed pawn, and now black also needs to be very careful. So bishop back to c5, king to b2, and now king to d5. By pushing the pawn to e5, the d5 square has been weakened, and now the black king can maybe somehow wiggle his way into the game. But it's still going to be very tricky with the queen in the game. So queen to h1 with check. We have king to c4, and here white needs to go back. For example, queen to e1, and black has no way of pushing this. As long as white keeps an eye on the f2 square, there's nothing you can do here. But here Anne played something else. Instead of e1, Anne played the ambitious e6. Now she also wants to start pushing her past pawn, and it doesn't seem like black can do anything here, because if you go for the immediate bishop to f2 here, then just e7. You don't really care, because if black gets a queen, white will just capture it, captures, and now white also gets a queen, and now you no longer have to worry about black's passed pawn. So instead of this, after this queen to h1, after this e6 move, of course, Max did not go for bishop to f2. He played something else, but it's a very tricky idea. So feel free to pause the video and win this game for Max while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this devious idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop to e4. It comes with an attack on the queen, and now what can you do here with the queen? Let's try a queen to e1, which is what was played in the game. And it does make sense, because you also want to keep an eye on the f2 square. But here comes the problem. King to e2. And this is now very, very problematic, as now bishop to e3 and bishop to d2 are coming, and you will very successfully push the queen out of the way. And also e7 now does not help you, because the bishop covers that square. So there's no tactic here for white that saves her. So here queen to b1 check was played, king to e3, but now queen to g1 with check. But just king to f3 by Max, and it was in this position that Anne-Marie resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. You can capture the bishop, but it doesn't really do you anything, since now black gets a queen into the game, and white is simply much too slow to do anything about this. You can push the pawn, but after queen to b1 check and a few more checks, it's just gonna be a very easy game. For example, king a3 are gonna go bishop to c2. Threatening checkmate, and the white will never ever get this pawn into a queen, because of all of the threats. So after king to f3, Anne-Marie resigned, and a great victory was achieved by Max, who also scored his second Grandmaster norm, as he published on Twitter. He said, it is great to be playing chess over the board again, even though it wasn't easy to get to the Vergani Cup. It was definitely worth it. Scored my second Grandmaster norm in the first event, and just played one of the coolest games I have had, which the engine sometimes fails to understand. And yes, those are the greatest games, those that the engines fail to understand. Now, was this a good queen sacrifice to start off the game with? I'm gonna say yes. Was it an absolutely correct one regarding the engine? Maybe not, but I mean, who wouldn't play this? This is just such a fine, natural move to play. I always say my favorite queen sacrifice ever done was Nezhmedinov, of course, versus Chernikov 1962 Soviet Team Championship. Was that queen sacrifice correct? In those days, it was considered that it wasn't, then it was considered that it was fine, then again no. But now the modern engines say that white is only maybe a little bit worse, and it gives you so much to play for. So I think it was definitely worth it. And here, of course, here black had so much to play for, and that queen was just suffering on e1 for the entire game. I mean, this is no way to have fun playing chess, having your queen stuck on e1 and never being able to move. So even though the engines maybe disagree with it, and they think, okay, maybe with perfect play white could have survived this, I think it was definitely worth the shot, and it was well worth it, as like Max said, he got his second Grandmaster norm in the event. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it, as so many of you have requested it. Really, I've enjoyed it immensely. I love such games where the queen is sacrificed very early on in the game. I would like to thank Rick Malik, Pablo Mohan, Marcus Matthews, Vika Sarna, and Dejan Samardzic for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the good stuff. I know you're wondering how come there's another game between Paul Charles Morphy and James Stanley Kipping, since we only said there were 2 of them. Well, 2 of them were actual games over the board, and this game is not, well, so to say, over the board, because only Kipping is looking at the board, whereas Morphy is holding a blindfold simultaneous exhibition. So this is one of the games Morphy played. Again, the 3rd game and final against James Stanley Kipping. Morphy has the white pieces, and again, a few words from Lawson's book regarding this Birmingham meeting, as everyone was really eager to see if Morphy would make it in time, if he would be able to play in the tournament, and they even already paired him in round 1, because they thought, I mean, he's Morphy, of course he will come and play, but he didn't. He was late on purpose, and he just wanted to face Howard Staunton. So a little bit from the book. So some of the strongest participants of this Birmingham meeting: Staunton, Folkbeer, Löwenthal, Saint Amand, Owen, Bird, and Kipping. So those are some incredibly strong gentlemen. And they say the grand tournament had started on August 24th. In the hope that Morphy might arrive in time to compete, his name had been entered and paired with Mr. Smith. When Morphy failed to arrive, Mr. Smith was given the point, as there was an odd number of players. Of the players worthy of special note, Staunton, Löwenthal, Folkbeer, and Saint Amand all won in the first round. So pairings for the second round brought Staunton against Löwenthal, and imagine this. Löwenthal defeated Staunton and kicked him out of the tournament, whereas Folkbeer defeated Saint Amand and faced Löwenthal in the finals. And in the finals, for the remainder of the tournament, play was to be held in London, the grand tournament being suspended the next day for Morphy's blindfold exhibition. So the grand final will have to wait for Morphy to complete his blindfold exhibition. And then what happened as the conclusion, the long delayed final result of the tournament did not come until September 23rd, when Löwenthal, by defeating Folkbeer, won first prize. It was a fine recovery, considering that he had suffered defeat by Morphy only 3 days before the tournament. The prize money was greatly increased, since Morphy had declined the £70 that had been offered to him to come to England. So it does seem like Löwenthal gets the last laugh, maybe not the entire laugh, as he did not face Morphy, but he did win a great tournament here. And I think even if Morphy wasn't sure if he would defeat Staunton had they played, I'm pretty sure he was more than confident now when he saw that he lost to Löwenthal. But like Morphy said, one game in a tournament means nothing, and this is exactly why Morphy wanted to face Löwenthal in a series of games, either the best of 10, best of 12, best of 16, whatever, but not like a game in the tournament. So we're gonna get back to that and see what happens in Morphy's relentless pursuit to face Howard Staunton. But now the third game between Paul Charles Morphy and James Stanley Kipping, Morphy being blindfold. So let's see what happens. Morphy again opens with e4. Sorry about that. We have e5. Knight to f3, knight to c6, and now Morphy doesn't go for bishop to c4. So unfortunately, we will not see another Evans Gambit game between the two of them, but rather goes for the Scotch. So d4 is on the board. We have e captures on d4. And now, rather than recapturing on d4, bishop to c4. And here, keeping goes for bishop to c5. Bishop to b4 is also kind of playable, but it's a very tricky idea, because after c3, black will capture and you can just castle, give up another pawn, and you're going to get this position where white give up a lot of pawns, but his bishop pair is really fully operational, and the black has to be very careful here. But obviously, keeping knows that Morphy is well versed in the secrets of the Scotch, so he just goes bishop to c5. We have castles by Morphy, and Lowenthal also commented on this game. He said that c3 is playable here, but c3 knight f6 goes into a very well known line of the Gioco Piano that was known even back then, so of course Morphy tries to avoid that. Morphy castles here, and now comes d6. Again, keeping shows that he also knows a lot of theory, because, for example, knight f6, e6, e5 attacking the knight, and d5 go into a well-known line of the Italian game, the Max Lange attack, which also is avoided here. So d6, and now finally c3 by Morphy. We have queen to c6, not really interested in grabbing another pawn, and bishop to g5. Now challenging the queen, queen g6, and only now Morphy captures on d4, c captures on d4. We have a small capture fest here, captures, and now queen captures on g5. And here Morphy goes for f4. Not worried about opening up this diagonal, because he can always play something like king to h1, and there are no problems here. Here we have queen to g6 by keeping, and now king to h1. Now Morphy unpinned, and the knight can finally move. And here the problem is you cannot go for the pawn. If you go for the pawn, then just rook e1 wins the queen. So that's not happening. So here keeping went knight to h6. It's a bit of a mystery why knight to h6 instead of knight to f6, but he probably thought Morphy would march forward with the e pawn, so maybe he wanted the f5 square for the knight, who knows. But okay, here he played knight to h6, and it probably confused Morphy. As you can see, I used this quote by Lowenthal himself above the board. The accuracy with which Mr. Morphy opens his games when playing blindfold is truly remarkable, and this is pretty much true for all the games Morphy played blindfold except for this one. Because here you have to be very careful. You should either go f5 or you should go bishop to b5 check to kind of force black into hiding, or something like that. Just continue developing knight to c3. But the move Morphy played, it seems like a reasonable move, just taking away the g4 square from the knight, so the knight cannot go here, cannot go here. But this actually loses the game for Morphy. So Morphy missed it because he was blindfolded, but hopefully you are not, as you are watching the video. And feel free to pause the video here and try to find the winning idea for keeping while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you have just defeated Paul Charles Morphy. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop captures on h3. And this is just a wonderful idea, because now queen captures on e4 will come with check. And not accepting the bishop is just, I mean, you don't have any good moves here. You're being, checkmate is being threatened. And really, there's not at all anything you can play here. So Morphy did capture the bishop, but now comes queen captures on e4. This comes with check, and keeping will just win back the piece. So Morphy completely missed this idea. It's a two-move combination, but playing blindfold, it was enough for Morphy to miss it. So queen to f3, he immediately offers a queen trade, and now comes queen captures on d4. So the knight is recaptured. Rook to e1 with check, and now king to d7. So the black king is a bit loose, but white king is complete. His defenses are completely busted. So here, knight a3, defending the bishop here, and now just bishop captures on a3, removing one of the defenders of the bishop on c4. So of course you cannot recapture. But first, bishop to b5 check. We have c6, and now comes b captures on a3. Morphy tries to trick keeping into capturing the bishop here, but then just queen captures on b7, and it's all over. King has to move, and you lose the rook here because the king has nowhere to go. The rook completely cuts off the king from the e-file. You would have to go back, and now the rook is undefended, and that's just it. Or you don't even have to play this. You can even play rook to c1, and it's checkmate whatever black plays. Even if something like this, then this is checkmate. So Morphy had an idea here. However, keeping, of course, not interested in the bishop on b5, just continued development. Rook h to e8. We have rook 8 to c1 by Morphy, and now comes d5. Now the queen no longer has access to the b7 pawn, so Morphy shifts it over to b3. Queen to b3. And now again, can you capture the bishop? Well, if you capture it, then queen captures on b5 with check, and it's incredibly tricky. Again, the rook controls the entire e-file, and king would have to be very, very careful. Of course, you cannot go to, king to d8, then rook captures on e8 is checkmate. So you'd have to go king to d6, and then we just have rook captures, and queen captures, and we get this endgame where Morphy would be up the exchange, but with the king so loose, it's very hard to say that he would be able to do something about it. Even queen e4 check just trades the queens, and black has more pawns. It would be, white would definitely be better here, but how much better, it's hard to say. So here instead, after queen to b3, we don't have captures, but rather king to c7. So very, very precise play by Kipping, and Morphy continues with bishop to d3. Now the bishop can no longer stay there. We have rook to e3, black rook to e3. Now with the double attack here, and now Morphy trades rook to e3, queen captures on e3, and now rook to b1. Morphy goes after the b7 pawn, and now just queen captures on h3. There wasn't anything Morphy could have done about this, so king to g1. And now, well, you can immediately continue harassing the white king, even go knight to g4. Kipping sees no reason to allow queen captures on b7. So he plays b6, and now rook to e1 by Morphy, hoping to make some sort of a nice rook lift here, but just rook queen g3. The king has to defend the rook, otherwise you're going to lose the rook. So king f1, now queen captures on f4 with check. King g2, and now queen to g5 with check. King f1, and now knight to g4. Not much to do for white here. The e7 square is now covered by the queen, so Morphy goes rook e2. But now knight to e3 check, and it was in this position that Paul Morphy resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done. You can give up the rook, but then you're just in a terrible position, down material, or you could continue with king f2, but then just rook to e8, and again, white has no moves here. Whatever you play, let's say you play anything, is just a very nice king hunt. Queen h4 check, king f3, queen h3 check, king f2. Now we're going to go queen f1 check, and now the rook is lost. King g3, queen captures on e2, and so on. So after knight to e3, Morphy resigned, and an excellent victory for James Stanley Kipping, who was able to get one victory against Paul Charles Morphy, albeit a blindfold one, but still. You know, any victory against Paul Morphy is a great victory, and he probably, told the story of this great victory to everyone, like for his entire life. I mean, who wouldn't? So yeah. This is one of the games from Morphy's blindfold exhibition. I'm gonna try and look for some other ones. Maybe they're interesting. If they are, we're gonna show them. If not, we are continuing Morphy's pursuit to face Howard Staunton over the board in a series of games and prove that he is not only the finest chess player in America, but also in Europe, and of course, by that definition, in those days, the entire world. So yeah. That's the game. I do hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Jonathan Paul Madrid Abaca, Manfred Sickenberger, Solomon Yakubov, Thomas Blondell, and Jeremy Wade for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And if you don't know, the first link in the description below starts the Morphy saga from scratch, so if you're new to the channel, you can also check that out as well. See you soon. Hello everyone and welcome to a really awesome attacking game. A lot of you have been asking me to show a few games from the women's FIDE Grand Prix in Gibraltar that happened a few days ago, and this is the one that I chose. The tournament is already over. Jansa Abdul Malik won the tournament without a single loss, and not only did she win the tournament, she won her Grandmaster title, and this is one game I decided to show. But if you guys know of any great games from the event, do share it using hashtag suggestion. I will go through it. So here Jansa faces Antoaneta Stefanova, former women's world champion from Bulgaria from 2006 till 2008. While she was facing her, she was still an international master. Always difficult when you're facing such an experienced grandmaster. But in this game, it's really a beauty. Without further ado, let's check it out. Abdulmalik opens with e4. We have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now d4. It's been a while since we had a nice Scotch game. We have e captures on d4, knight captures, and now queen to f6. Bishop to c5 is the most played move here, and then you can, of course, combine it with queen to f6. Queen to f6 a bit more rare, but still played quite a lot. And here, knight to b3. Now, this is already very rare. Bishop to e3, just guarding the knight while developing a piece, kind of is the usual way people do it. But knight to b3, it will serve a very nice purpose, as you'll see. We have queen to g6, a standard move when playing against this setup, putting pressure on the g2 pawn, attacking the e4 pawn. Here, Jansa defends it with f3, and now comes bishop to d6. And here, with this bishop to d6 move, you see that Black does not really have a good square to develop this bishop. You want to develop this knight to e7, so the bishop obviously is not coming to e7. You can't really bring it to c5. Now the knight from b3 nicely defends this, and if you go bishop to b4 check, well, white will simply play bishop to d2, and you don't really gain anything by this, or even c3 is possible. But here we have bishop to d6. This is what black usually plays against this setup. Knight to c3, and now comes knight g to e7. Here there is a trick that you might try. Bishop captures on h2. I know a lot of you are interested in this. Bishop captures on h2. Rook captures and queen g3 check. Why doesn't black just play this? Well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because after the king moves, obviously you have to capture the rook, otherwise you're just going to be down too much material. Knight to d5 comes. And it seems like, okay, but the queen is guarding c7. There is no threat here. But there is a really great threat. And, well, bishop to f4 is coming. There's not much you can do about it, especially if you play something like, let's say, play knight to f6, knight e7. You try to finish development, the bishop to f4, and it's game over. There's no playing this. The queen is under attack, or you're already threatening this. And if queen to h4, trying to say, okay, if you capture it, then maybe I'm going to be able to capture here. You can just play something like knight captures here, king moves, and queen to d6 guarding the bishop, and it's a total annihilation. There's no playing this for black. So while you could maybe, play something better, it's definitely not suggested to play something like this. So here, knight g to e7, black just wants to finish development. And now this position has been reached before. There were some moves. Pawn to g4 is the most usual move that's played here. But here we have f4, and it is now already as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how black deals with this. While you could just castle here, black decides to go bishop to b4 first. Now the knight is pinned, of course, queen captures on e4 is the threat. So now just f5, pushing back the queen, queen to f6, and now comes the bishop to d3. So just continuing development, maybe preparing to castle here. And here you really have to allow white to sacrifice a pawn. You really have nothing better other than to, for example, captures with check, pawn captures, queen captures, and now after bishop to d2, the queen now guards the rook here. Okay, the rook was already guarded, but still, we're just going to play the queen back. Now white's going to castle, and, well, black is very much behind in development, but nothing too serious is happening. Of course, you have to be very careful, but you will be able to play this. However, in the game, black decided that maybe it's a bit too much going after this pawn. We're already behind on development, so here bishop to d6 was played, but now comes, now there will be trouble. Because here, okay, if white castles, then you will probably go for something like queen h4, threaten this checkmating pattern with bishop captures on h2, and if this, then we can just sacrifice here and get a draw by perpetual, which for black maybe isn't such a bad idea. from this position. However, Jansa plays queen to h5, and now there is no more castling, because now if you castle, then you've allowed castles, and now that, well, there's really not much you can do against bishop to g5. For example, if h6, you're just going to play g4. Now g5 is coming, and it's just unplayable position for black. Whatever you play, let's say make a move, g5 is coming. H captures, we're going to play bishop captures, and after the queen moves, you really don't care. There's no queen captures here because the queen covers the h2 square. You're just going to play rook f3, rook h3, and you're going to checkmate the black king. If g6, you don't care, just f captures, knight captures, and now, for example, knight to d5, because the knight just moves, this knight is coming to f6. That's, I mean, this game is over. So instead, after this queen to h5, you really don't have a good move. a5 was played, because what else to play? I mean, nothing is really happening. Here we have castles by white, and now a4. And this is just a bit too much. Now we don't really care about the knight here. We just play bishop to g5. We have queen to e5, and now bishop back to f4. The rook from f1 guards the bishop here. We have queen to f6. Probably the least painful move for black is just to give up the queen here for a piece and the rook, and say, okay, maybe I can hold this, although you really can't. This is the equivalent of resigning. Queen back to f6 was played, and now e5. e5 is incredible, because the e5 square is covered 3 times by black, but white doesn't care. Here we have bishop captures on e5, and now feel free to pause the video here and win this game for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that it's a similar position from the one in the thumbnail, and you should be able to find it. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight to e4. And this is just now crazy. All of these squares are taken away from the black queen, and you don't have a move here. So you could capture on f5, which is what happened in the game, but now comes the good stuff, knight to d6 with check. Now we've reached the position from the thumbnail, and basically if this was a game for maybe from an event that's not so important, maybe we'd see a resigns here, but in the actual game we saw a few more moves. So black captured on d6, we have bishop captures on f5, not knight captures on f5, but first a captures on b3, grabbing this knight, bishop captures on e5, knight captures on e5, and now bishop to e4. So black will still attempt a few moves. So pawn captures on a2, you do have a passed pawn on a2, so it might be possible to do something. But now queen d1, going after the d6 pawn, we have rook to a6 defending the pawn, and now bishop to d5, now getting rid of the passed pawn. And once you eliminated this, then black really has nothing to play for. So here rook to a5, going after the bishop, just bishop captures on a2. We have d5, now this is defended, but you don't care. Queen e1 attacks the rook here. We have knight to c6, now attacking the rook, also adding a little more protection to this knight here, and now b4. And this is now the cleanest way to end the game. It's simply beautiful how Abdulmalik does it. Attacks the rook, rook to b5, and now c3. Adding another defender to the pawn here, and now preparing to end the game, because after castle was played, just queen to e2, attacking the rook, and that's it. There's no way to defend the rook. You have to play rook to b6, and now b5, and that's it. It was in this position on move 28 that Antoneta Stefanova resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The knight is under attack, you can't move it, the pawn is defended. If you move the knight, you lose this knight, and then, of course, you will be down simply too much material. So, like I said, the game could have been resigned on move 17 if it was maybe a less important game, but since it's a very important game, it lasted a whole 28 moves. But really an impressive attacking game, and it's been a while since we've seen a nice Scotch miniature. And it really just all went down to black prolonging castles, but it was never really a good idea. And even if you castled in a position where it was okay, you would still allow white to have a very nice attack. But all in all, a great game. And like I said, Jansa won the Grandmaster's title. She crossed the 2500 ELO rating, and won the tournament without a single loss. These are the winners. Let me just find it. These are the winners. Abdulmalik in the middle, Maria Muzichuk on the left, and Gunay Mamajada on the right, scoring third place. So very nicely done. Congratulations on the world's newest grandmaster, and hope we see many more games like this. I've checked out some of her other games. She's a very aggressive player, plays a very interesting chess, very much attacking chess. So if you guys want to see some more games, do share in the comment section below. And like I said, if you want to see any other games from the event, do use hashtag suggestion, and we're gonna go through all of your suggestions. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Kaihan Gultekin, Evgeny Brishkin, Mario Gudel, Mark London, and Jeffrey Turner for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphe saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone and welcome back to our mini Kasparov saga. We are back at the Croatian Grand Chester. It's the second day of the Blitz section and it's Kasparov with the white pieces against his nemesis from round 1 of yesterday, Jordan. And I've decided to pronounce him only as Jordan for the time being because it seems like, well, just pronouncing his actual last name is impossible. I've tried it, and some of you actually were kind enough to send me, proper ways of pronouncing this. But even 3 of you have sent me this, and all 3 pronunciations were different. And one of you even sent me an original video where Jordan pronounces it himself, and that pronunciation is pure sorcery. I cannot pronounce that. Like half of the letters are silent, and this is one name where I give up for the moment. I am planning on learning it, and I will improve, but for the moment he will only be referred to as the Jordan. So it's Garry Kasparov versus the Jordan, and it's the first game of the second day of the Blitz. It's quite the game. Kasparov had a terrible day yesterday. Out of the 9 games, he only got 1 draw against Alexander Grishuk, and he lost all the other 8 games. And now well, we'll see if his bad luck will continue. Will this be officially his worst tournament ever, or will he bounce back? So here with the white pieces, Kasparov opens with e4. We have e5, and Kasparov goes for his long lost weapon, and that is of course the Scotch. So knight to f3, knight to c6, and d4. The Scotch game, we have e captures on d4, knight captures, and the knight to f6. Now the Schmidt variation of the Scotch. We have knight captures on c6, b captures, and e5 now. So this is very well known. There are thousands of games in the database with this exact same line. Queen to e7 now, of course, pinning this pawn, and queen to e2. Now the threat of course is just capturing this knight. So knight to d5 and c4. And Kasparov himself has many games in the database with this exact same line. And usually what black will do here is either retreat with the knight to b6, or even pin the pawn with bishop to e6, so you can't capture the knight. But here Jordan goes for a different line. He plays queen to b4 with check, saying that, okay, Kasparov forgot to play queen to b4 check against Mamedov yesterday. I'm gonna play it now and see what happens. So here, queen to b4 check. Again, it's not a new move, but it's a very rare one. So here, knight to d2, Kasparov defends, and now knight to f4 with an attack on the queen. We have queen to e3, and now knight to g6. So it's a bit different than all the other lines that we're used to seeing in this particular variation, because usually this knight ends up on b6, not on g6. So let's see how Garry deals with this. We have bishop to d3. He, of course, just continues development, and now bishop to c5, developing with tempo. The queen retreats to g3, and now both players just castle. So castles, and now d6, attacking this pawn here, and saying, what are you going to do here? So while Kasparov could defend it, he could even decide to give up the bishop for knight here, but that's something Kasparov can never do. He's a natural attacker, and of course he wants his bishop pair to be fully operational at all costs. So here there is one game in the database where e captures on d6 was played, but here Kasparov just plays knight to b3. He prepares to develop his other bishop, and he says, okay, you can have your pawn, I'm going to grab your bishop, so I'm going to be the one with the bishop pair, and I'm going to try and attack your king. So here Jordan accepts the challenge, and he goes for knight captures on e5. We have a3 first, pushing the queen back, queen to b6, and now knight captures on c5. We have queen captures, and now bishop to e3. Going for some rapid development here, so only one move for the black queen, that's queen to a5, and now Kasparov continues advancing with b4. So Kasparov is down a pawn, but he's the one dictating the tone of the battle. So queen to a4, and now bishop to d4, making it impossible for black to eliminate this very strong light square bishop, as you would get checkmated here on g7. And there's also another problem. If you don't do anything, f4 is coming. You're going to have to give up the knight, otherwise you're again getting checkmated. So here Van Forest goes for the absolute strongest defensive idea, and that is f6. Yes, sometimes that is the absolute strongest idea. And now Kasparov has to figure out how to get past this monster knight on e5. So now he says, all right, I know this is really a problem for me now, and the f6 pawn really numbs down the power of my bishop, so I'm just going to give up the bishop for knight here, and then take advantage of your lack of development to maybe do some damage. So here f captures on e5, and now f4, trying to open up the position before Forrest can develop before Jordan can develop his pieces. So here, and yeah, I've tried to master it, but it is, you know, some of you say it's 4 ace, some of you say it's 4 iced, 4 east, it's you know, I will improve. So Jordan here, after f4, plays bishop to f5. He continues development, and now f captures on e5. We have bishop captures on d3, Kasparov captures on d3, and now d captures on e5. So for the moment, you can see that the material is now equal. Sorry, black is still up a pawn, but now queen to d7 by Kasparov. And now that's a very active square for the queen. You're attacking c7, and Jordan has to decide what to do here. So he could try to grab a pawn, but it doesn't really work. For example, captures, and now what do you do? If you capture on a3, well, queen to f7 check, and it's black who's getting checkmated. You just give up the queen, and that's it. Black gets checkmated. So you can't really go all greedy here. So queen to b3, now putting pressure on c4, but also just trying to remaneuver the queen back into the game via queen to e3 check. So here Kasparov grabs the pawn on c6, and now we have queen to e3 check, king to h1, and Van Forest, again, I do it, goes king to h8. We have rook f to e1, going after the queen here, queen to c3, and now queen captures on c7. So grabbing yet another pawn, but Jordan, of course, is playing to bring the rook in and pick up this pawn. So rook a to c8, and now queen captures on a7, grabbing yet another pawn, rook captures on c4, and now h3. Kasparov creates some breathing room for the king here, and rook c to f4 now, nicely doubling up on the f-file. His e5 pawn is protected, so maybe you can start advancing it, and Kasparov will try, of course, to advance his queenside pawns to see who is faster. But for the moment, Kasparov is up a pawn, and things are looking very, very good for him. We have queen to c5. Gary immediately goes for the queen trade, and Jordan, of course, declines this. We have queen back to b2, and now Kasparov grabs the pawn here, wanting to trade the queens of the board, because now he's up 2 pawns, and, you know, it's just going to be good for him. But again, Jordan has to decline this. He plays queen to b3, and here the position is completely winning for Gary. Of course, he's up 2 pawns, but there's one very efficient way to end the game. So feel free to pause the video here and win the game for Gary the quickest way possible while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on playing pretty much anything. You can play rook to b1, start advancing the pawn, you can push the pawn to b5 immediately, but the quickest way to win this is just to capture the rook, and that's it. Of course, black's weakness of the back rank is very much present here, because if the rook captures the queen now, just rook to e8 check, and that's it. We could also give up the rook first, but you have to play queen here, and then captures, and then of course it's just 2 pawns up, 2 connected pass pawns up. This is completely winning for white. But both of them are extremely low on time. This is a blitz game, and instead of this, Kasparov just plays queen to e3. So what does he want here? He wants to trade queens now, and then use both of the rooks, probably place this rook on b1, and then just advance both of his pawns. With so little time on the clock, this seems to be the more straightforward way, but leaving the queens on the board maybe isn't so great. But okay, queen to c4, and now rook a to c1, chasing his queen, queen back to f7, now tripling here on the f-file, and now queen to g3. Now, if this rook, for example, ever moves, you can always play something like rook here and then put some pressure on the g-file, but it's, you know, anything is possible. But basically, Kasparov's plan is just to advance his queenside pawn. So here we have h6, Van Forest also... I do it again. Jordan also creates some breathing room for his king, and Kasparov starts advancing his pass pawn. So b5, we have queen to d5, and now a4. So even offering this pawn just to discoordinate black's rooks a little bit, Jordan grabs the pawn, rook captures on a4, but now just rook to b1, and this pawn is now a monster as it's protected by a rook. So rook to f5, and now comes b6, just continuing to push that past pawn. We have rook to g5, putting some pressure here on the g pawn, but now just b7. And here Kasparov says, okay, that's it. If you capture my queen, I'm just going to bring another queen into the game and pick up the rook, and I'm going to be up a rook. King h7, queen captures on g3, and of course I win here. So instead, after this b7 move, we have queen captures on b7 by Jordan, and now comes queen captures on g5, and it was in this position that Jordan resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So after 9 rounds, 10th round goes to Garry Kasparov. He retaliates for his loss to Jordan in the first round. It was a really nice 25 move brilliancy, but now he bounces back, and we'll see if this is the first of many victories of the beast with 1,000 eyes, or if this is just one out of an 18. So yeah, here of course you resign because there is nothing for you to do. If you capture the queen, we're just going to capture this queen, and now we're up a whole rook, and other than that you really don't have a move. If you try and do something like queen captures here, we're just going to play queen to d8 check or anything here. I mean, there's really there's nothing we can't do. Queen to d8 check, king to h7, and now we're just going to play rook captures on b1, so we just move our queen away from danger, and we're up a full queen. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, after queen captures on g5, Jordan resigned the game, and this is the first victory for Garry Kasparov in this blitz section of the Croatian Grand Chess Tour. And also, sorry about mispronouncing Jordan's last name so many times in this video. So yeah, once again, hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Kevin Keith, Robert Aratun, and Jem Alboyd and CruiseAudio.com for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of this mini Kasparov saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone, and welcome to another really exciting game from the US Championship 2022. It is Awander Liang versus Levon Aronian, and if you liked yesterday's game between Anand and Arjun, as it was an incredibly complicated game, you will also enjoy this one. Plus, it resembles a game, not resembles, but to a certain point it follows the game Paul Morphy played 167 years ago. So it's very exciting stuff, and now let's check it out. Awander has the white pieces, and he opens with e4. We have e5 by Levon, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now striking in the center with pawn to d4. So a nice Scotch game. E captures on d4, and now bishop to c4, going for the Scotch gambit, and now bishop to c5. And here you can, well, there are a couple of moves you could consider here. c3 is the main move. There are even some ideas that b4 can be played here, even though it was never attempted. It's my idea. But here, knight to g5, the Sarat variation, is what Awander goes for, and it's a very old line. Like I said, it was present when Paul Morphy played chess, and it goes after the f7 pawn. Now, the only good way to defend it is to defend with knight to h6, which is what Levon does. Knight captures on f7. Knight captures with bishop captures with check, king captures, and now the position of the bishop on c5 is what makes the sacrifice on f7 possible. So it's not really a sacrifice. Queen h5 check, g6, and now queen captures on c5, winning back the piece. And now the game reached the point that Alexander Bafo-Meek had against Paul Morphy in 1855, so 167 years ago, and Paul Morphy played d6 in this position. It's a very famous game where Morphy harasses the white queen, and in the end forces the white queen to go back to the starting square to d1 before he ends the game brilliantly. I can even show you, I'm pretty sure I made a video on this game. I just have no idea how I named it, so if any of you know what it is, feel free to share with everyone so they can check it out. But even though I'm pretty sure I made a video on it, but I'm going to show you the game after we check out this original game. So here, pawn to d5 instead does not follow Morphy's advice of pawn to d6, and now we have pawn to c3, and this pawn to c3 is a new move in the position. There have been some attempts of castles. Also, queen captures on d5 check has been played, e captures on d5, advancing the pawn to e5 has been played, but c3 is a new move, so now already as of move 10 we have a completely new game. So here we have D captures on e4 by Levon, and Liang just castles. And now how do you continue? Levon has a D pawn and an E pawn, and they're incredibly impressive. Imagine if you can get something like D3 going. What could go wrong? The problem is the king is on f7. The king has no pawns, just f3. I mean, this will be devastating. Bishop coming to h6. This is a very, very hard to play. So Levon says, all right, let's bring the rook into the game. You can have one of those pawns. C captures on d4. Queen captures on d4. Levon would be very happy with a queen trade, of course, but Awander says, nope, queen to g5. And now comes knight to b4. Here it would be much safer to play something like bishop to f5, but knight to b4 is incredibly interesting, because here Levon wants to play a knight to c2 to go after the rook on a1, and it doesn't seem like you have all that many great moves here, but Awander plays bishop to d2. And now you realize that if you go for the rook with knight to c2, bishop c3 attacks the queen, guards f6, guards g7, you will not be able to defend this position. If queen here guarding this square, then just queen h6. It's completely disgusting to defend this with black, and especially if you capture the rook, then just queen captures on h7, king e6, and now let's say knight to a3. There's no escaping with the king. All of the squares here are being covered. Rook is coming to d1 at some point. I mean, terrible. So after bishop to d2, Levon says, all right, the knight to b4 might not be such a great idea, and he plays queen back to d6. And now what do you play? Here, okay, you could try a lot of different ideas, but Liang just continues to develop. Knight to c3, c6 now, preventing the knight from going any deeper, and now rook a to d1. We have bishop to f5, and now there is... well, there is a way to break through black's position here, but you have to be very, very precise. So feel free to pause the video, as Levon is already lost on move 16, while I give you a couple of seconds and find the brilliant idea. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting either of the two ideas. One is f3, one is g4. f3 can be played simply to open up the f file, and well, black would have to capture here, otherwise just captures will win the game. So let's say captures, and then g4 is coming. There's really not much you can do about this. But instead, g4 was played. It's very similar, now just attacking the bishop, and there's really no good way to move the bishop here. Your bishop is hanging, and if you play something like bishop to d7, then you put the bishop in front of the rook. Something like, let's say, knight b5 attacks the queen, and if c captures on b5, bishop captures on b4, and now you can't capture because rook captures on d7, checks, and you're just gonna get destroyed. So you can play something like queen e6, but now h3, and again, it's not much of a material advantage, but the black king is wide open on f7. You will not be able to hold this. So instead, Levon finds a very tricky idea. He plays h6, offers the h6 pawn, but of course, for the moment, the pawn cannot be captured. If you capture, rook to h8, and now Levon is the one who is in trouble, and you have to play some very, very precise moves here to get out of this. Like knight captures, you attack the black queen. After bishop captures, now you can play bishop captures, attack the black queen again, and as the black queen moves, to keep an eye on the h2 pawn, now you play bishop to d6, and now you force a queen trade, something like captures, and bishop d5. You would get to play this endgame. But of course, you do not want to throw away all of your advantage, so Liang just goes queen back to h4. And now the bishop is still hanging. The problem is, and this is why g4 is so strong, and no doubt why all of you found it when you paused the video, bishop to e6 loses, bishop to d7 loses, and bishop to c8 loses. And Levon played bishop to c8, but it's such an ugly move that I feel that it is necessary to discuss why bishop to e6 is bad. Well, okay, rook no longer guards the e4 pawn, just knight captures, attacks the queen, gains access to all of these squares. Bishop now can come to c3. This is pretty much self-explanatory. Now, the other idea after, for example, the retreat of the bishop to d7 is now that not only the queen is a target here, but also the bishop. And now you can play bishop captures on h6, and after a move like knight to d5, blocking the rook's attack towards the queen, now you play f3. And after e3, keeping the f-file closed, now knight to e4. Again, attacking the queen. Once the queen moves, because you have to keep an eye on this square, otherwise just captures and queen to f6, you can play rook f to e1, and after rook to h8, putting the rook here, now even rook captures on e3. And there is not much you can do. Rook captures runs into rook captures on d7, and now if queen to f4, which is a very tricky idea, as it seems like you're offering the queen, but white can even trade here. Bishop captures, rook captures, and after bishop g5, rook h back to h8. And now knight to d6 check, for example, king to g8, and as the rook is hanging, rook to e2. So you would get some sort of a position like this, where it's very unpleasant for black to play rook to f8. You can defend the pawn with king to g2, and you get something like this. With white having two fully active rooks, the bishop is beautiful on g5, h4 is coming, the knight is spectacular on d6, and the black rook's not really doing all that much. The knight and the bishop are in well, on pretty bad square, so this would be winning for white. So those are the two options, and also one of the reasons why Levon after g4 played the bishop all the way back to c8. But now, even though there aren't any tactics against the bishop itself, the rooks are no longer connected, and therefore you don't have to fear rook to h8. So now Liang just captures on h6. And okay, the queen is now hanging, so knight to d3, and now bishop to g5, preparing queen to h7 check. So queen to e5, preparing to go back with the queen if check is delivered, and now pawn to f3, just hoping to open up the f-file, and there's really no good way to counter this. You can't really capture or push the pawn because then the knight hangs, so you have to just wait and hope for the best. Here rook to h8 is played, as the queen also covers the h8 square now. F captures on e4, opens up a discovery here, king to g8, now bishop to h6, beautiful. Prevents rook captures queen, but also threatens rook to f8 check. So queen to d4 check, king to h1, and now bishop to e6, again connecting the rooks, not really as the king is on g8, but sort of connecting everything. And now queen to g5, preparing queen captures on g6, so bishop to f7, and now of course you're not gonna allow Levon to set up some sort of a defense here, just rook captures on f7. And now if king captures, then rook to f1 check, and you just go on a nice king hunt. Even if knight to f2 check, you can just play king g2, and still you're gonna capture this knight. If king to e6, you try and run away, rook captures, and after rook 8 to g8, guarding that g pawn, you can even play e5, and that's just it. There's no move you can play here. Knight covers d square, so no checks are possible. If queen captures, then rook e2 just captures the queen. It resigns. So what you have to play here after rook captures on f7, well, you have to resign, but of course Levon will try a few more tricks. Rook captures on h6 is what he played. Now rook captures on d3. It's not mandatory. You could also play other moves, but it just eliminates any counter chances Levon might have. Queen captures on d3, and now, of course, not queen captures on h6 and allowing king captures here, but a nice queen to f6, now threatening checkmate here. So can Levon defend this? The problem is there's no way to check the white king. The b1 square covered by the knight, this is covered by the knight, this is covered by the queen, this is covered by the queen, and those are basically the four squares that the black queen can use to check the white king, and also this is defended by the knight. So there are no checks here. Levon has to give up the rook in order to try and get some sort of a perpetual. There is the maybe interesting, instead of just going for rook captures on h2 right away, you could try some checks, but it's very hard to actually do them, as they're not possible yet. So first you have to play rook captures on h2, king captures with queen to d2 check, king to g1, and now queen to c1 with check, king to f2, and now queen to h6, stopping checkmate. The reason why not queen captures on b2 is very, very interesting, but we have to show it. Now, you're not going to move the knight and allow the trade of queens. You're going to play king e3, Now look at this. Queen c1 check, king to d3. You even allow rook to d8 check, because now if queen captures rook, then king captures rook on f7. Now king to c4, you even allow b5 with check. You move the king to b3, and now there are no more checks, and of course you are getting checkmated once queen h6 is played. g5 comes, and that's just it. The queen doesn't have access to these squares, and of course once you move the queen, you get checkmated. So after king to f2, queen to h6 was played right away, without going for all of that. But now pawn to g5, and it was in this position on move 32 that Levon Aronian resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So very nicely done. Once the queen moves, of course, checkmate is coming. So beautifully played by a wonder. And for those of you who are interested, I will now show how the game went from that position in the game between Meek and Paul Morphy. And for those of you who are interested, leading the tournament now is Fabiano Caruana with 3.5 points, and the Wonderling and Samuel Savian are tied in second and third with 3 points. But now let's go back to this position, and I have to let Medo in the room. I can hear him coming. Again, there's some food being cooked down there, so Medo is, watching if everything is prepared properly. But yeah, after queen captures on c5, Levon played d5 here against the Wonder, but Morphy played the d6 against Meek, and now let's just quickly go over that game, as it's quite a nice one. So now the queen is already hanging. We have queen to b5, and now rook to e8. Morphy, of course, goes for the white king. Queen to b3 with check, and now only now pawn to d5 by Morphy. But now, of course, opening up the e-file is not something you want to do. So pawn to f3, defending, and now knight to a5. Morphy further continues harassing the white queen. Queen to d3 here, queen to b5 repeating would be slightly better, and then if c6, then you can bring the queen to e2. But okay, Meek played queen to d3, and now Morphy captures on e4 with tempo as the queen is hanging. F captures on e4, and now queen to h4 with check. G3, rook captures on e4 with check. King to f2, and queen to e7 now. Preparing to bring the bishop into the game and land that rook on f8. So here, knight to d2 was played, attacking the rook, but now rook to e3, as bishop no longer covers this square. Queen to b5, going after the knight, but Morphy now says, come on, are you serious? He plays c6, and he offers up the knight, but the knight, of course, cannot be captured, as the queen must guard the e2 square. So queen back to f1, and now the beautiful bishop to h3. Again, Morphy offers the bishop to free up the e2 square. If you capture, then rook to e2 check will just end in a very, very nice checkmate. Queen to e3 with check, king g4, h5 with check, and that's it. Now you either give up the queen, or king to h4, and queen to e7 will be checkmate. So instead of all of this, after bishop to h3, Morphy forces Meek's queen all the way back to the starting square, queen to d1, and now it's a matter of rook to f8. This is what Morphy played, and it was in this position on move 20 that Alexander Meek resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Actually, maybe it's not in this position that he resigned. I'm pretty sure it's in this position, but I will check. I don't want to trick you guys. Let me just check. No, okay, so it's not in this position. Knight to f3 was played, preparing to sort of kind of block check, but then Morphy played king to e8, and it was in this position that Alexander Meek resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Problem is, problem is, look at your position. Let's say rook to e1. Now will offer a trade of rooks here, and maybe remove some of the attackers. The problem is you can just play rook captures on f3 and remove all of the defenders of the rook on e1. Let's say queen captures on f3, rook captures on f3, king captures, now queen captures on e1, and that's pretty much it. Nothing much to be done here. Whatever you play, let's say b4, it's a matter of a few checks before you get checkmated. Queen d5, and that's it. All of the squares are taken from the white king. If g4, g5 check, king g3, and queen g2, for example, will be checkmate. But of course, Meek did not wait for all of this. Once Morphy played king back to e8, it was in this position that he resigned the game. But what is incredible about this game is that Meek sacrifices to sort of harass the Morphe's king and force the king away from the starting square, and then the queen, of course, jumps into the attack, but then Morphe forces the white queen all the way back to her starting square while he brings his king all the way to his starting square. So it's not only an impressive game and a very precise game, but also a very, very poetic one. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys, those were the games. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Never ever doubt Paul Morphy, and good things will happen to you. I would like to thank Red Rose, Kerrigan, David Massa, Matthew Benoit, and Ravishing Reptiles YouTube for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of everything that's currently happening in the chess world and checking up on your wonderful suggestions. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone, and welcome to another very nice game between Nepo and Magnus in our preparation for the World Chess Championship match in Dubai this year. This game was also played in a World Chess Championship match, in a World Chess Championship Blitz tournament, also in Dubai. It was played in 2014. And again, a very nice game featuring a Jedi Mind Trick moment, so you guys will enjoy this one. So let's check it out. It's Nepo with the white pieces, and he opens with e4. Magnus goes for e5. We have knight to f3, knight to c6, and now d4. Nepo goes for the Scotch opening. We have e captures on d4, and now knight captures on d4. And now we have bishop to c5. So attacking this knight twice. Now usually people play something like bishop to e3, just defending this knight, but now we have knight captures on c6, and now not recapturing or recapturing with the b pawn, but rather queen to f6, going for that Charlie White attack, or the throbbing gambit as it's been called. So you can't really save the knight, otherwise you're getting checkmated. You have to play something here, and you could play something like queen to d2, you could play queen to f3. Those are all very known moves, but Nepo goes for f4, and it's a move that he's been known to play. But it's a very, very rare move. So how will black continue? Well, obviously you have to capture back here, and it seems like a good idea to capture back with the queen so you don't mess up your pawn structure. But in this particular opening where this line is played, it's usually better to just capture with the pawn. So here d captures on c6. This also allows your bishop to quickly enter the game if needed. Knight to c3, and now we have queen to h4 with check. Interestingly, knight to h6 is considered best here, and there is a game that Nepo played against Lazaro Baptista Bruzon next year in 2015 in the Capablanca Memorial Tournament, where Nepo won a very nice game. But here Magnus goes for queen to h4 check, and it is now as of move 7 that this position has never been reached again. So g3, Nepo blocks the attack, queen back to e7, and now bishop to d3. And now knight to f6 by Magnus, putting more pressure on the e4 pawn. So queen e2. If you're wondering why sometimes the squares light up in red without me actually wanting to, it's some sort of a bug that's been going on today. I have no idea why, but probably it'll go away. So here, bishop to g4, attacking the queen, and the queen now has to move. Queen to g2, we're still keeping an eye on the e4 pawn, and now Magnus just castles queen side. And now you can see that black has a very, very nice development here. Both of his bishops are slicing through the entire board, and the rook is very nicely placed. The other rook can easily come to e8. So what can you play here? Bishop to d2. Nepo needs to castle as quickly as possible, and now Magnus goes knight to d5, since the e pawn cannot really capture the knight. But there was the very interesting knight captures on e4, and now it doesn't really matter what you capture with, because either rook to e8 or f5 will be very strong. For example, bishop captures, we're going to play rook f to e8, and I'll push f5 here, attack the bishop, and well, we've won a pawn at least. But in the game, knight to d5 was played by Magnus, and now h3. Nepo wants to get rid of this bishop from g4 so he can finally castle. Bishop back to e6, and now a3. So still waiting with that castle's move. And now Magnus plays bishop to d4. A very interesting option here was knight to e3. It looks ugly, but for example, bishop captures. Bishop captures, now this bishop prevents the white king from castling. And if queen f3 attacking this bishop, you can just play bishop to d4, and still white knight cannot castle. For example, if castles, we can just capture here, then capture an a3 check. White will fall apart here. So maybe a very interesting way of just keeping that white king in the center of the board. But Magnus played bishop to d4 right away. Now, okay, you're putting a lot of pressure on the c3 square, and now Nepo just trades. We have knight captures, c captures, and now, only now, we have castles queen side. And now d captures on e4, bishop captures, attacking this b7 pawn, and now c6. So preventing this queen bishop battery to be operating in full capacity. Rook h to e1, now putting a rook on a nice open file as the queen is still on e7. And now queen to c7. Magnus could go to queen to f6 to put pressure on this b2 pawn, but c3 then, and well, you just kick away the bishop, for example, to b6. But it is an interesting option. You free up maybe the b3 square for the bishop. So, but we have to keep in mind that this is a blitz game. So after rook h to e1, queen to c7 by Magnus, and now f5, trying to get this bishop, well, to a less active square. Bishop to d5, and now bishop to f4, attacking the queen here. So queen to b6, putting pressure on the b2 pawn. Now you really want to capture here. And now, only now, Nepo plays c3. So bishop captures on e4, queen captures on e4, and now bishop back to f6. And now the really interesting part comes. The f7 pawn is extremely weak here, and this is what Nepo goes for. He plays queen to c4, puts pressure on the f7 pawn, and Magnus trades once. We have rook captures on d1, rook captures, and the rook to f8 now. Again with the red square, sorry about that. But it's a really cool moment, because it seems like the f7 pawn is defended, but maybe there's something you can do about it. So feel free to pause the video here. What would you play in this position? How can white still make progress while I give you a couple of seconds? So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this interesting idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop to d6. That's the move that can be played here. And we will discuss why it wasn't played, because now obviously your rook is hanging. You have to move the rook. So here we have rook to d8, and now if queen captures on f7, it seems like everything is perfectly fine. What Magnus probably saw in, as this is a blitz game, is queen to e3 check, king to b1, and now bishop to e7, just winning for black, because of course if well, your bishop is just hanging now, and if you move the bishop, for example, with captures, then you lose the rook on d1 with check, and after king a2 we can even capture on g3, and you don't really have a way to attack here, just king to c7, and everything is nicely defended. Black is just much better here. But probably what was missed by Magnus is that after bishop to d6, rook to d8, there's this capture on f7, and now if queen to e3, you don't play king b1, you play king c2. Seems a bit awkward, keeping your king in the center like this, but now bishop to e7 doesn't do anything, because there's no threat of rook captures on d1. The king just defends this, and if queen to e4 check, you can play king to b3, where your king is nicely defended. The queen controls this diagonal, and there are no further checks that are not crazy checks, and you don't have all that much to worry about here. For example, rook d7 attacks the queen, even queen to e6, you can offer a queen trade here if captures, rook to d8, and you are up a pawn. You have a very nice pass pawn on e6, so maybe this was an interesting way of continuing this. But in the game we have a4 by Nepo, and now we have h6 by Magnus. We have king to b1, and now queen to a5, so going after this f5 pawn, g4 defending it, and now Magnus goes bishop to e5, offers a trade of bishops, bishop back to e3, Nepo declines, and now a6, so just making some more breathing room for the king. Bishop to c5 now, putting pressure on the rook here, and now rook to d8, offering a rook trade, so rook captures, king captures, or rather queen captures. I don't know why I thought the king captured, and only now queen captures on f7, but it's only a temporary win of a pawn, because here we have a queen to d1 check by Magnus, king to a2, and queen captures on a4 with check. So now if you go back, we probably have a repetition here. So instead, bishop back to a3 was played, and now bishop to f6. And now we have this position where the material is completely equal, and the bishops are of the same color, so there's not a lot you can do about this position. So queen e6 check, king to b8, queen to d6 check, and of course king back to c8. We have queen e6 check, king to b8, and it was in this position on move 36 that Nepo and Magnus agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. But very similar to the previous game that we've shown, here there really was the option of just going after this f7 pawn with bishop to d6. It was pretty much the only chance anyone got in this game. Well, it seems that in the previous game, Magnus trusted Nepo on his assessment of the position, and here it was the other way around, and the opportunity to push for something more has vanished. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We're gonna cover some more of their encounters before the actual World Chess Championship match 2021, and I know you guys are always interested in this. Here are the standings of the 2014 World Blitz Championship. So here they are. Let me just improve that a little bit. So Magnus won first place, as you can see, with 17 out of 21, followed by Jan Nepomniachtchi and Hikaru Nakamura with 16 out of 21, followed by Lequang Liam, Shahriar Mamedyarov, Levon Aronian, Vishwanathan Anand, Rauf Mamedov, Gabriel Sargsyan, Alexander Morzevich, Peter Svidler, Sergey Yudin, Alex Idreev, Pentala Harikrishna, Radoslav Wojtaszek, Anton Korobov, Alexander Grishuk, Eduardo Itzuraga Bonelli, and Etienne Bacro, and so on. But you can see that it was very, very intense, and this was also the year that Magnus won all the titles. So he, of course, defended his World Chess Championship title against Anand. He won the World Rapid Championship and the World Blitz Championship. I think he won the Rapid Championship some half a point ahead of Fabiano Caruana and Anand. I could be wrong, but I think it's the case. So yeah, good year for Magnus, but as you can see, Nepo always following. So will he be following, or will he be leading in November? We'll see what happens. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Jean-Francois Bond, Matthias Bollinger, Oliver Nihius, the Hoodie Guy, and the Wind Machine for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of their interesting previous matchups, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else is happening in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone, and welcome to an incredible game that was played in the FIDE Women's Grand Prix between Maria Muzichuk and Alexandra Kostenyuk, and it's a game that features a most remarkable move that was not played. For a while now, I've been saying that every chess game can be summarized via a single square, and some of you guys probably are thinking that I'm joking when I say this, but every game, if inspected with sufficient analysis, will provide us the answer that it is indeed so. So let's check it out and see why I'm constantly repeating this and why you should always be aware of this. Maria, with the white pieces, opens with e4. We have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to c4. The Italian game is on the board. Bishop to c5, the Gioco Piano, and now castles. This is already a slight inaccuracy, not really, but you of course know what I'm referring to. Knight to f6 with d3, and here Alexandra castles. And now c3 is the main move here. Maria goes for h3. D5 now, striking in the center, attacks the bishop, e captures, and now knight captures on d5. We have rook to e1, going after the e5 pawn, but now just bishop to e6. This is a very well-known move. Black is not gambiting a pawn here or blundering a pawn. If you were to capture this pawn, you could resign on the spot. The problem is after captures, and captures, there's the very annoying bishop captures on f2 check. And now you have to move the king, and black's position is just better because if you capture, then queen f6 check gobbles up the rook on e5. So after bishop to e6, we have c3, and now there are a few games, top tier games even, where bishop to b6 was played. For example, Karyakin had it against Aronian. Also, Alexeyenko had it against Anand. A lot of other very top-tier games to reach this position where bishop to b6 was played. But here we have pawn to a5, and it is now, as of move 9, that we have a completely new game. And a5 is a great move as it stops white from playing b4. So here, bishop to b5, now going after the knight, so you can gobble up the pawn. Knight to a7 now attacks the bishop, and bishop goes back. Bishop a4, we we have b5 attacks the bishop, bishop back to c2, and now knight to c6. And it seems like black achieved some progress here, advancing the pawns all the way to a5 and b5, but white has the central d4 strike. And this is very strong as it frees up the d3 square for the white queen, will put pressure on h7 and also on that b5 pawn. And okay, e captures on d4, and now queen to d3, going for checkmate. And probably safest is to, just to go back with the knight. If knight to f6, then let's say queen captures on b5, you have to defend the bishop. Queen to d6 defends the bishop. And now if bishop to f4, trying to kick away the black queen from the defense of the bishop, you just trade. Captures, captures, and now let's say rook a to d8, and everything is perfectly fine. However, the game continued much differently. g6 was played, which, okay, you no longer have to worry about this diagonal, but you have weakened your king side a little bit. We have queen captures on b5, attacking the bishop, queen to d6 defending, and now knight b to d2, threatening to win the game on the spot with knight to e4. This will attack the queen and the bishop, then you're just going to lose a piece. So rook 8 to b8 chases away the white queen, queen to f1, and now knight to e3. A beautiful move by Alexandra, offering a knight, but only for the moment. You will recapture your piece easily, and there's no way to actually decline this because the bishop on c2 is hanging as well, and you don't have time for a move like queen to d3. If you do this, then bishop to f5, and then you have all sorts of problems. So instead, after knight to e3, just captures, f captures on e3, we have d captures on e3. Now you cannot save the knight. If you try something like knight to e4, then just e2 check, and that's it, game over. So after this, d captures on e3, we have king to h1, and now e captures on d2. Okay, winning back material. Knight captures on d2. You can't capture back with the bishop, as you have to keep an eye on your b2 pawn. So knight captures on d2, and now the position is very, very critical. Black has this beautiful bishop pair here, very, very unpleasant situation for white. But if white can play this properly and defend well, white should have the upper hand. However, in the game, f5 was played, and this now allows Maria to win the game on the spot, like literally on the spot. So feel free to pause the video and try to find this idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on always spotting the essence of every chess game. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to b4. This is the move that if it was played in the game, we would probably see resignation here. There's no question about it. And the problem is, how do you not play this move? One thing that comes to mind immediately is just rook captures on e6. And once you see this, let's say rook captures on e6, queen captures, bishop b3 now attacks the queen, and the king is on the same diagonal. The problem is there's rook captures on b3. Black just gives back some material, and nothing really happening here. So here, the problem is, after this queen captures on e6 move, you don't play bishop to b3, you play b4 right away. So this is one way to do it. It's not the greatest way. The best way is to play b4 before even capturing on e6. But even this would be fine, because now you're attacking the bishop, also threatening bishop to b3. So let's say queen moves, you're going to capture on c5. And even if queen captures on c3, it looks like the bishop and the rook are hanging, you can play bishop b3 check. And now if rook captures on b3, trying to pick up the rook on a1, knight captures. Now the rook is defended. And if a4, trying to dislodge the knight, bishop to d2 attacks the queen, and if queen to c2, then rook c1, and all of your troubles just go away. If queen to e4, you can even play rook c4, pick up the pawn, easy game. But the absolute best way to do it is not to capture the bishop, is just to play b4, and now it resigns. The problem is there's now nothing black can do. Rook captures on e6 will just be a free piece, and if you play a captures on b4, then still rook captures on e6, queen captures and bishop to b3 will be even worse. So there's really no move black can play after pawn to b4. There is no move black can play here. So it's very interesting that Maria decided not to play this. As if you check this, then you find that bishop to b3 can be countered with rook captures. Then you just play b4. You stop rook captures on b3, and that's pretty much it. She played a move that's also good for white, but it's not like instant resignation. She played knight to c4. Probably this is the idea that she had like a couple of moves back, and then she got the position that she wanted, and she was very happy about it, as this is still should be winning for white. So you just stop looking. Maybe that's the reason, but that's why I always say always check b4. Like even in dumbest positions possible, check b4. Maybe it works. But okay, knight to c4 was played, attacks the queen, and now queen back to d7. If you trading is impossible because this comes with check, and once the king moves, just bishop to f4, and now you're going to lose this bishop as well. The queen has no squares to keep defending the bishop. So instead, queen to d7 was played, and now we have bishop to h6. Attacks the rook, rook f to d8, and now bishop to b3. Still, white's position is incredible. Bishop to d5. Now the bishops here are also quite spectacular. We have bishop to g5, and now it seems like white is very, very close to victory, but the problem is black now has a beautiful move that allows black straight into the game, and Alexandra spots it, pawn to f4, and this now threatens queen captures on h3, and that's a huge problem. That's going to be checkmate. The bishop also covers the g1 square, so you don't have time to go pawn grabbing. King to h2 was played, and now pawn to f3. So what do you play here? G captures on f3. We have queen to f5. Now again offering the rook to gain the f4 square for the black queen. Bishop captures on d8. This is probably best is f4, but she goes for bishop captures on d8. Queen to f4 with check now, king to g2, and now rook captures on d8. And all of a sudden, it really doesn't look like white is attacking anymore. So rook a to d1, and now pawn to a4. Again, the absolute best move, and what follows is nothing short of spectacular. Look at this. Bishop captures on a4. Bishop captures on c4 now, attacks the white queen, and the bishop is defended, but that matters not. Just queen captures on c4. A temporary queen sacrifice. Sorry, first rook captures on d8 check was played, but you could play it with queen captures on c4 first. Knight captures on d8, and now queen captures on c4. This comes with check, so you have to take the white queen. Queen captures on c4, and now bishop to b3, winning back the queen. Queen captures, a captures, and now look at the resulting endgame. Rook and 5 pawns versus knight, bishop, and 3 pawns. So with perfect play should be a draw. Let's see how they continued. King to f7. We have pawn to b4. Finally, it happens. A few moves too late. Bishop to d6 and pawn to h4 now. We have knight to e6, rook to d1, and now knight to f4 with check. King f2. We have king to e6, and now rook to d4. Bishop to e5 attacks the rook, and just rook back to d1. We have bishop to f6, goes after the pawn, just king to g3, knight to e2 with check, and now king to f2. And now the problem is there's no way to win the h4 pawn, and black has nothing better than to repeat moves here. Knight to f4 with check, king to g3, knight to e2 check, king to f2, and it was in this position on move 44 that Maria and Alexandra agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. But what a spectacular game, and what a possibility missed here after this pawn to f5 move. Of course, Alexandra saw that rook captures on e6 probably will not be enough for a victory, but she did not consider pawn to b4, nor did Maria here. But you, in your own games, will always consider it, and you will not lose or fail to achieve victories in positions where pawn to b4 is possible. And it's possible in every game, at least once. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Always be mindful of that b4 square. I would like to thank Kerry Smith, Martin Aldine, Marcus Grebel, Bocho, and Kenneth Fraser for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens with in the chess world, probably covering the grand final between Magnus and Hikaru. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone and welcome to a really wild Armageddon game between Wesley So and Hikaru Nakamura. Even though we already had the finals of Everything's Masters between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura, now Wesley and Hikaru are playing for the privilege of facing Magnus again in the grand final of the Everything's Masters. It's a weird new concept. But as Magnus already defeated Hikaru in the finals, if Hikaru now goes into the grand final against Magnus and he beats Magnus, then they will play another match, sort of because Hikaru already lost to Magnus. But if Wesley wins, and then he faces Magnus in the grand final, then Wesley will be the winner of it all. So a bit of a weird new concept, but could be interesting. We'll see how it goes. So first you have to win the game, and it's Armageddon. The first game, okay, Hikaru was not Hikaru. Wesley was better a little bit, but he couldn't pull off a win. Second game, they agreed to a draw very quickly, and now this is Armageddon. Let's see what happens. We have pawn to e4 by Wesley, and Hikaru got the black pieces as he bid 8 minutes, which is incredibly low, but he really wanted black to make his chances in Armageddon go a bit higher. But if anyone can win on demand, it is Wesley So. So e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now d4. Wesley goes for his Scotch. We have e captures on d4, knight captures, and knight to f6, the Schmidt variation. Knight captures, b captures, and pawn to e5. We have knight to d5, all very standard here. c4 here is the main move, bishop to d3, second most common idea. We have d6, captures, captures, and bishop to e4. Now, only one game ever reached this position, and in that game, queen to e7 was played. Here we have bishop to a6, a very nice pawn sacrifice by Hikaru. Who knows how long he's been preparing this one, but it definitely shouldn't be pleasant to play this. So okay, Wesley accepts the sacrifice, bishop captures, pawn captures, and queen captures. And now Wesley's up a pawn, but his king will be stuck in the center, at least for the moment. He will probably have to play some like a knight to c3, bishop d2 or e3, and castle queen side. So it's going to be a very sharp game. Rook to c8. You could also consider some like queen to e7 check, but it just doesn't do all that much. For example, queen e7 check, bishop to e3. I mean, the rook is hanging. Let's say rook to c8, knight to c3, and there's not much for black to do here. Like if you play g6, it's already game over. The rook is hanging, and bishop to a4 check will pick up the bishop, so black will just resign here. So instead, just rook to c8, you will play bishop to e7 and just castle. Knight to c3 with bishop to e7, and now bishop to e3. Bishop to c4, getting the queen off of such an active square. Queen to d2 and queen to a5 now. We have pawn to a3 and pawn to d5. We have knight to d1. Wesley offers a queen trade and Hikaru declines with queen to c7. We have bishop d4 attacking g7 and Hikaru just castles here. We have knight to e3 and bishop to g5 now. Pinning the knight here. Castles by Wesley, and now rook f to e8. We have king to b1, unpinning from this nasty diagonal, and now pawn to a5. We have pawn to h4, expanding on the king side, or you want to of course play h5, h6, and put pressure on that g7 pawn. So here Hikaru says, all right, let's just trade, captures, captures, and I'm gonna stop your advancement with pawn to h5 now. If Wesley was really desperate to try anything here, g4 might not actually be a bad try, just to open up lines of attack in front of the black king, but he goes rook h to e1. We have a4 and now bishop to d4. Wesley is just up a clean pawn, and he doesn't have all that much to worry about. As long as the c2 pawn is protected, he can just trade and try and enjoy his extra pawn. We have pawn to f6 by Hikaru, limiting the power of this dark square bishop. We have rook captures on e8, rook captures, and now rook to e1, offering a rook trade. Hikaru defends his rook, and now rook to e3. Hikaru trades with captures, captures, and queen to g4 now. And Hikaru says, all right, you're still up a pawn, but my position is very solid. Bishops are of opposite colors. If you trade queens, it's not going to be easy. And one thing I have to worry about is something like queens coming off the board, Wesley getting his king to c3 and then just playing b3, creating two connected pass pawns on the queen side. That could be a problem. So okay, g3, Wesley defends the h4 pawn, queen h3, and now queen to d1. We have queen to f5 and king to c1. We have queen to e5 and now bishop to d4. Chases away the queen, queen e4, bishop to e3, and queen to e5 now. We have queen to d4, and Hikaru declines the trade for the reason that we already gave. If you trade here, then it's just getting the king to c3 and playing b3. It's very, very hard to stop this. Like the king g6, king c3, king f5, g3, b3 captures, and the two connected pass pawns will be well, pretty much unstoppable. So instead, queen to f5, we have king to d2, and now queen to d7. We have king to c3, king to h7, and now pawn to b3. The pass pawns are now created. We have bishop to b5. Hikaru says, all right, if you want to capture, at least let's mess up your pawn structure. So queen to c5 puts pressure on the bishop. Now the king is coming to b4 as well. King to h8, Hikaru just, doing nothing, waiting to see what Wesley will try. King to b4 attacks the bishop, and bishop back to e2. We have king to c3, and now bishop back to b5. We have king to b2, and now king to h7. Hikaru says, I'm happy with a draw here. A draw is victory in Armageddon. So Wesley has to try something. Bishop to d4, we have king to h8, now bishop to c3, and bishop to c6. Just keeping an eye on everything. Queen to d4, and now king to g8. We have queen to f4, and now king to f7, bishop to d4, and now queen to e7. So not much happening here. Queen to e3, Wesley offers a queen trade, and Hikaru again declines. We have bishop to c5. Now you have to be careful, otherwise you might allow the white queen to infiltrate if the black queen moves. So king to g8, we have queen to e7, and now queen to c8. We have queen to d6, and king to h7. Hikaru just still standing still. Bishop to d4, and now queen to e8. We have pawn to f3 now. A captures on b3, and now we have king captures on b3. You could also play c captures on b3. Probably Wesley thought this was better to prevent any checks from the second rank. This way he will be able to avoid more checks, and he still does have the passed a pawn. So bishop to a4 check, king to b2, and now queen to e2, putting pressure on that c2 pawn. So queen c7 defends the pawn, and also might be having some nasty ideas of bishop captures on f6. So just queen to b5 with check, king to c3, and now king to g6, getting the king out of harm's way, king to d2, queen to f1, putting pressure on that f3 pawn, and just queen to c3, nicely defending, queen to g2 with check, king to c1, and now queen captures on g3. We have queen to d3 with check, king to f7, and now queen to f5, putting pressure on that d5 pawn. So queen captures on h4, queen captures on d5 with check, king to g6, and now king to b2. We have queen to f4, and now queen to c4. Not all that much to do for Wesley now. It is Hikaru who will be pushing for the win, as that h pawn does seem to be unstoppable. So queen to b8. Queen to b8 with check. We have king to c3, and now queen to b5, offering a queen trade. Here you have to trade. There's really not all that much you can try here. We have captures, and now interestingly there is a way to save the game, but Wesley doesn't really gain anything by that. So Wesley played something other than the move that saves the game, but just in case you guys are interested, feel free to pause the video and try to find the only move that saves the game for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being a true master of the end game. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is king to d2. This is the only move that saves the game. You have to beat that h-pawn before it becomes a queen. For example, h4, you're going to play king to e3, and now you are very happy. If something like pawn to h2, you can play king to f2, and you will be in time to stop that pawn. And if you don't even try it all the way, after, let's say, king to e3, let's say bishop to d7, you can just play whatever, king to f2, and again, you are you are in time, and you will be stopping this pawn. And now, slowly but surely, you will figure out a way how to start advancing your own pawns. However, in the game, Wesley played king to b4, and this is now just straight out winning for Hikaru. He plays bishop to e2, goes after the f3 pawn. That was the one that you had to go after, and there's no good way to save it. If you play something like pawn to f4, then king f5. And I mean, there's not all that much to be done here. If bishop e3, now h4, you cannot defend both this and the h2 square. You have to defend the h2 square in order to prevent h3, h2. So let's say a4, you're going to play h3, bishop to g1, you have to stop this. Now king captures a5, king to g3, now king to c5, and you don't really care. King to g2, the bishop has to move, and you win the game easily. And the bishop covers the a6 square, so you don't have to worry about the a pawn. So instead, after bishop e2, a4 was played by Wesley, but now bishop captures on f3, pawn to c4, and king to f5. We have king to c5, and here king to e6 was played, and he was in this position on move 70 that Wesley so resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So the reason you resign here is because the bishop is too strong. There's just no way to push those pawns for white. You're blockading your own pawns. You're going to have to waste a few moves to block the bishop, but even that will not help you. It's actually a funny line, so I will show it. Let's say g5, you have to push both of these pawns, otherwise the bishop will be able to stop them. A6, h4, a7, g4. Now you're going to have to move the king to block the bishop with your c pawn. h3, bishop to g1, you have to stop h2, g3, c5, h2, you're going to have to give up the bishop. Now c6, you are blocking the queening square, but now look at this, just bishop captures on c6, king captures, and h1 queen, and that's pretty much it. You're going to blockade the pawn, and that's all there is to it. So yeah, after king to e6, Wesley resigns, and Hikaru will get another crack at Magnus. He proceeds into the grand final, where he will face Magnus again. So like I said, if Hikaru now wins the match, then they will go into the grand final, where whoever wins will be the winner of Everything's Masters. But if Hikaru loses in the grand final, then that is truly it. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Wesley tried everything to win here. He was in a must-win situation. That's how Armageddon works, and he went for his... I believe this is Wesley's pet line. I think he even has a win against, well, a lot of players, but against Garry Kasparov, amongst others. So he definitely knows his stuff, which I think, of course, Hikaru knew. I think... they even played together this line several times, maybe like it was a tournament, I think, called Ultimate Moves, sometimes maybe during 2016, where I believe this line was very, very popular, and that Wesley actually played it against Hikaru. I don't know if he played it against Hikaru. I'm pretty sure he played it against Kasparov, but yeah. Obviously, Hikaru knows that, and he knows how to play against it. And what a spectacular line to prepare this beautiful pawn sacrifice, just cutting off the king from castling king's side, forcing him to go into opposite side castles. I mean, beautiful stuff by Hikaru here. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Kerry Smith, Martin Alden, Marcus Grebel, Bocho, and Kenneth Fraser for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the finals, of the grand finals, of the grand finals, and however many finals they come up with. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone, and welcome to a really nice game that was played last week, I believe, in chess.com's Title Tuesday tournament between Vasily Ivanchuk and Greg Shahade. Now, Chucky needs no introduction, but for those of you who don't know Greg, he's an international master from Philadelphia who has a lifelong goal to crush the Scandinavian defense, and he will often tweet about this. For example, here is one such tweet. There you have it. This is what Greg posted before his match with John Bartholomew in the EM Not a GM Chess Championship on chess.com. He says, "This is the guy who's going to crush the Scandi tomorrow," referring to the Scandinavian defense. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything for you if you haven't seen the match, but do check it out if you haven't. It was very interesting. So, that being said, let's check out the game. Now, Chucky with the white pieces opens... What's that? opens with e4, and here we have an opening that we don't see all that often. We have e5 by Greg, knight f3, knight to c6, and d4. Chucky goes for the Scotch game. We have e captures on d4, and now not recapturing but gambiting the pawn at the Goering gambit, which Greg accepts, and now knight captures on c3. In the olden days, you would even gambit one more pawn with bishop to c4, which gives white a lot of development already. You have bishops developed, but over time, black realized that there really aren't any problems here, so white isn't really playing this all that much. So instead, just knight captures on c3, some development for a pawn, and d6 now by Greg. If you don't want to develop your bishop all the way, then d6 makes sense. You want to play bishop e7, knight f6, castle, bring the bishop into the game, and so on. So bishop to c4, now with the c-pawn gambited away, Chucky wants to play bishop c4, queen b3, put pressure on the f7 pawn, knight g5, bring more pressure, and this is the idea. So knight to f6, continuing development, we have queen to b3, now pressuring the f7 pawn, and queen d7, just defending the pawn. And now knight g5, adding a third attacker to the f7 pawn. And now you could defend it with both knight d8 and knight to e5. Knight e5 is a little bit better as it also attacks the white's light square bishop here. And it's a much more active square for the knight. So bishop b5. Now threatening the queen, and c6. And now if you don't want to move the bishop back, you play f4, which is what Chucky plays. Now the knight is under attack, and here black has a lot of options, and I'm pretty sure, since this is a blitz game, that it's something Chucky had in his home lab quite a few times, as here black can go knight to g4, he could go knight to g6, even h6 is an idea, where you temporarily sacrifice a piece, for example, captures, and now white's king is still in the center of the board, the knight is under attack, the bishop is under attack, and black will be doing fine here. However, Greg went for c captures on b5, he went for the trade right away, f captures on e5, and now d captures on e5. And now bishop to e3, making room for the rook to come to d1 to put more pressure on black's position. Here we have h6, trying to get the knight away. As long as the knight is on g5 and the queen on b3, you constantly have to worry about the f7 pawn. So of course Greg wants to kick it away, but first a nice in-between move, rook to d1, attacking the queen, and now queen to e7. If you go queen to c7, then just knight b5 wins the game on the spot, queen e7, and now bishop to c5. The queen has no more squares from where she can keep an eye on the f7 pawn, and if you capture the bishop, then queen captures on f7 is checkmate. So this is game over. So instead, Greg went to e7, and now bishop to c5 isn't as strong because black has bishop to e6, which also attacks white's queen. So instead, Chucky goes queen captures on b5, and now knight to d7. Bishop to d7 is in fact better here. Just attacking the queen, and after captures you bring the rook into the game. Later on you're going to move the queen, move the bishop, and finally castle. However, Greg went for knight to d7, and this puts black in a pretty bad situation, as the d5 square is no longer guarded by the knight. So here Chuck immediately grabs the outpost for the knight, knight to d5, comes with an attack on the queen, and now queen to d8. And now what do you play here? Well, you could move the knight, but there's no rush. So what would you play here? Even feel free to pause the video and try to find a winning idea for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that the knight on g5 can be given away. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's queen to c4. Now there is no defense against knight to c7 check, and black's position will just crumble. So h captures on g5, there is nothing better. So knight to c7 with check, king e7, and now comes Chucky played castles here, which makes sense. You castle and then you put pressure on the f7 pawn, but just because the position allows it, feel free to pause the video once again and try to find the forcing mate in 3 while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, as it's not an easy sequence to find. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop captures on g5 with check. You either play f6 and then queen e6 is checkmate, or you block with knight to f6, and now comes queen b4 check. Queen has to block, the king has no square, so queen d6, and now queen captures will be checkmate. But Chucky instead went for castles. It's a similar idea. Now you just want to play queen captures on f7 with mate. And here we have f6 by Greg, preventing queen captures on f7 mate, but allowing a different one, which I'm not going to even ask you to pause the video, as we've already seen it in the previous line. Of course, queen to e6 checkmate. So yeah, a very nice game by Vasily Ivanchuk in 19 moves, quite a brilliancy, if you will. And Greg played a great game, but it was in that moment where he had to play bishop to d7 that he blocked with the knight, and from there it was just downhill. But up until that point, it was a good game by both sides. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Jordan Schmela, Guillermo Munoz Beltran, Doug McNabb, Bark Pike, and Marco Leipold for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Lindoris Abbey Rapid Challenge, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world, such as this brilliancy here. So yeah, thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your weekend. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the good stuff. We are continuing the adventures of Meek and Morphy. I really enjoyed your jokes in the previous video. That Pickle Rick one was not Pickle Rick, Pickle Meek was a very nice touch. But yeah, we're continuing with the match. Morphy is currently leading the match 2-0, and he only needs one more win to end the match. If not, we're still gonna see at least 3 games if Morphy doesn't achieve a victory here. So without further ado, let's check it out. E4 is already on the board. So E4, we have E5 by Morphy, Knight F3, Knight to C6, and in third game, Judge Meek goes for the Scotch opening. We have D4. Sorry about that. Immediately striking in the center, Morphy, no stranger to the Scotch himself, E captures on D4, and now C3. A well-known gambit, the Göring gambit, so the so-called Göring gambit, we have captures on C3, and now knight captures on C3. Morphy often enjoyed even going further with the gambit with bishop to C4, offering the B2 pawn as well. But here Meek is satisfied with the development he's got. Knight captures on C3, we have bishop to C5 by Morphy, and bishop to c4. Both players continuing development. We have d6 and now h3, not allowing Morphy this bishop to g4 idea, although might be that the h3 move isn't all that necessary. Perhaps if you just castle, let's say bishop to g4, you can unpin with queen to b3, as it comes with an attack on the b7 and the df7 pawn. So also a possibility, but it is quite complicated. You have to consider this, you have to consider knight a5, for example, attacking the queen and the bishop, queen d7 just defending, so a lot of ideas here. So instead, Meek just prevents Morphy from going to g4 and bishop to e6 now. Again, Morphy wants to trade here to get a semi-open f-file for his rook, and it's very important to know that this position has never been reached again. Bishop to b5 now, which is kind of a loss of a tempo, as you already played bishop to c4, and now you're moving it back to b5, and you're allowing Morphy this excellent square for his bishop. So you should either just keep it there, maybe just defend it, maybe go bishop back to b3 or queen e2 or something like that, or even just capture. But bishop to b5, not so much. But okay, knight e7 by Morphy, and now knight to g5. Being down 2 points in the match probably makes Meek want to just go for it, and this is one game where he really goes for it. So knight g5, we have castles, and now queen to h5, already threatening mate. Which isn't all that big of a deal, since there's only one good move for black that defends mate, and that is h6. This is what Morphy plays, and now knight back to f3. as the knight is under attack. You could try something like h4, just defend the knight there, but Morphy will just ignore you, and he's gonna continue the game with something like a6, push the bishop back, and continue the game. He's not gonna bother with your knight on g5. But okay, Meek goes back, knight f3, and now knight to g6, trying to get the knight to f4 to further harass the queen. Not at the moment because the bishop is guarding it, but he does have plans of doing so. g4 by Meek. Like I said, Meek is going all out this game, and now knight c to e5. An excellent square for the knight, and also if captures, which is what happened in the game, now comes d captures on e5, and now the f4 square is guarded for the knight to occupy. And now g5, look at Meek. Meek is unstoppable here. He wants to checkmate Morphy, and he's not even trying to be secretive about it. But queen to d4. Now it's Morphy who threatens mate. Bishop to e3, blocking mate and attacking the queen. Now queen to b4. And here, Meek goes for bishop captures on c5. Now attacks the queen and the bishop. But Morphy could capture the bishop, but he could also go for the b2 pawn. Capturing the bishop really allows Meek to go forward with the attack. But if you calculate precisely, for example, captures on h6, knight f4, pushes the queen back, queen g5, threatens mate, g6, defending mate, queen to f6, now again threatening mate, knight h5, defends mate and kicks away the queen. Queen g5, king h7, and Morphy would continue to play this with a better position, as the black king is very safe there, and the white king doesn't really know whether he's going to go to the king side, the queen side, and it's not very safe in the center of the board. So queen captures on c5 works for Morphy, but he prefers this time he goes for the more complicated queen captures on b2. And now again, he's attacking the rook, he's attacking the knight, and he's asking Meek, what do you want to do? With best defense, Meek actually gets to keep the exchange, but he will be down a lot of pawns, and this is what Meek chooses. It is the strongest move recommended by the engine, so good for Meek. He castles here, he gives up the knight, now the rooks are defending each other. Queen captures on c3, and he goes for the exchange. Bishop captures on f8. We have rook captures on f8, and now it's a pretty tricky position. Meek is up the exchange, but Morphy is up, well, for the moment, up 2 pawns, but white pawns are very weak. So here you could just continue with g captures on h6, knight f4, and so on. But first, rook a to c1. Meek wants to, well, further develop his forces before committing to the final attack. Queen to b2 by Morphy, now attacking the bishop here, and Meek goes bishop to c4. He wants to now, well, either capture here, which will remove the defender of the knight, or he trades and then he just, well, eliminates one of the attackers of the h3 pawn. But here's a problem. Morphy has knight to f4, and now the problem is that the pawn is now attacked twice. So Meek has to go back, queen back to d1, and knight captures on h3 with check. We have king back to g2, knight to f4 with check, and king to h1. And here we have queen to b6. And this is a very, very important move for several reasons, which you'll see in the game. So here, best for Meek is to maybe try and trade queens and play the endgame, even though he's down a lot of pawns. For example, captures on g5, queen captures on b6, you're going to capture here. And now you try and play this endgame where Meek is down 4 pawns. He is up the exchange, so maybe he could pull through, but it's very unlikely. So instead, Meek goes for g captures on h6, but now you are playing Morphy here. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the winning idea for white, for Morphy, who's black, obviously. Well, I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that the queen to b6 was played to control the 6th rank. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop captures on c4. You just grab a piece, and now if the piece is recaptured with rook captures on c4, then it's checkmate in 4. Queen captures on h6, check. King g1, now queen g5 with check. King h1, and queen to g2 will be mate. So nothing you can do about that. So instead, Meek tried one last idea, h7 with check. King captures on h7, and now queen g4, not allowing this check followed by queen g5 check, as the queen now covers g5, but still Morphy goes queen to h6 with check. king to g1, and now just picks up the rook. Bishop captures on f1. And here, okay, Meek didn't get checkmated, but he's down too much material. Rook captures on f1, and here just rook to d8. Morphy's up a piece, and there's not much to do here. Meek played a few more moves, a4, but Morphy played, of course, the strongest move, rook to d6. The rook is coming to g6, and that's it. There's no way to save the queen or the game. So f3 was played, trying to make a run for it with the king, but Morphy just played rook to g6, and well, that's just it. Although Meek didn't resign here. Meek played king to f2, and then he resigned, which is a bit odd in game 1 and game 3. I think in game 2 also, Meek's last move was not something you would usually play. I mean, you resign, you don't play like a weird move and then resign. This looks to me like it was played in maybe 2020 in modern chess, and then, you know, someone picks up the king and places it, and then the electronic board remembers the move, and then the PGN is generated that way. That's what this move reminds me of. But no, it's actually what Meek played, and it was only in this position on move 31 that he resigned the game. So really impressive stuff by Morphy. Morphy beats both of the opponents he played so far with a result of 3-0. But Paulsen, who defeated his first opponent 3-0, also defeated Montgomery, his second opponent, also 3-0. Even though only 2 games were played, and the third game was won by default, as Montgomery had to return to Philadelphia. So Morphy and Paulsen doing really well. Next up are the semifinals of the First American Chess Congress, so we're gonna see what happens there. And after defeating Judge Meek, Alexander Balfour Meek, he made a joke that was apparently very funny. He said that Morphy should really give him an opportunity here and there. Like, he shouldn't play the strongest moves all the time, because if he continues doing so, that Meek will pick him up, put him in his pocket, and carry him away. Now, either humor really changed in the last 150 years, or maybe I just don't get the joke. But supposedly the joke is somewhat funny, I guess, because Morphy was a very tiny person, and Judge Meek was quite a large person. And then it was funny because it's not hard to imagine Judge Meek actually picking up Morphy and putting him in his pocket, due to the, well, just the difference in their size, I guess. But yeah, maybe there's also something else that just isn't funny after 150 years. But, you know, in the spirit of the moment, yeah, I guess it could be somewhat funny. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Morphy takes the second match with a result of 3-0, and we'll just have to see what happens next. I would like to thank Abdullah Rajeh, Boiler Kevin, Stephen White, Benjamin Scholzes, and Vlad Semenov for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.